just a good-looking fan. And any barmaid can be a star maid if she dances with or without a plan. Hooray for Hollywood! When you're terrific, if you're even good. Where anyone at all from Shirley Temple to Amy Semple is equally understood. Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you, children of all ages, you, yes, you.
Are we rated for all ages these days?
Depends on who I'm hosting with. You are listening to a Radulich and Broadcasting premiere podcast, Damn You, Hollywood. And here's your host, Robert Winfree. Yay!
Hey, everybody. Welcome to 2022, the sequel to 2020. It'll be a franchise before you know it.
And what? So at what point is there the reboot?
2030.
2030? Okay.
Reboot.
You know, I have to say, well, I'm going to give you a compliment sandwich.
Oh, God, I can say it. I might get in trouble for this, but 2030 is when Don Jr. runs for president.
So I'm going to give you a compliment sandwich, or we talked the Matrix Resurrections last week, or you doing your best Khrushchev impression did bang the shoe and
a little bit
45 minutes about the Matrix Resurrections, and going into it, I was like, I don't know why this film has, and we talked about this. We don't need to regurgitate that conversation, but there's a reason why I'm bringing this up.
Yeah.
Going into it, I was just like, what are you so mad about? Like, I just like, it's not a good film, but Jesus, it's not as bad as you're making it out to be.
It really is.
Hang on, I'm going to get there. That's why it's a compliment sandwich. So I'm watching the first Matrix with Jonas yesterday.
I imagine that was fun.
Yeah, it was. He got through it okay, you know, because it gets a little long in the tooth in the middle, especially if you're almost an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
But he got through it just fine. And then he gets to everything from saving Morbius on. He was like, "This is the most amazing movie ever." He's just sitting on the edge of the bed, like in the Gollum position, going, "So many bullets, so many bullets." And
it's precious.
Yes, he's really getting into the whole action thing. So he loved the hell out of it. My viewing experience was something slightly different. While I enjoyed the time with my son, and I still enjoy the movie, I'm now realizing how much The Matrix Resurrections really does suck. Like, it's terrible. It is far worse than I was giving it credit for upon rewatching the first one again, because your memory for detail is better than mine typically. And I'm guessing this is what informs some of your frustration. They downright copy, not just like dialogue, but like scenes, movement by movement, and especially in the first act of Resurrections.
There are periods where they straight up overlay the film.
Yeah.
Now, I give the film I give Resurrections a touch of credit because they're deliberately trying to mess with your perception of reality. So I think to a degree there it works in specific circumstances. In other circumstances, like, God, you're lazy.
Yeah, there's paying homage, and then there's lazy writing and copying and just, you know. Like, we said this at length last week. We don't need to, I don't need to go into any more depth in this in saying this woman has a singular talent. She made The Matrix once. That's all she's ever been able to do. She
contributed to the making of the first Matrix.
Yeah, she contributed to the making of the first Matrix. That is all she is able to do, and she should not do anything else because it's an utter failure. I don't remember what the second thing was I was gonna nerf you about, but it doesn't matter. Let's get on with the show. We're done with that. I just needed to touch base with you on that again. So we're talking Don't Look Up and Being the Ricardos tonight, and normally
we're not quite dressing up tonight, obviously.
Not ascending.
But we're dealing in slightly more sophisticated offerings in theory.
I would like a pat on the back for my being less married to strict structure as I used to be. Because, Damn You Hollywood used to be a singular film, and that was it. And it was a deep dive into that film. And, and last year...
hang on. Let me reach over. Here you go.
Thank you. So, last year you had said like, "Hey, we don't know where this is all going, so why don't we start doing more of these streaming movies?" And we came up with the news segment. Like, I reworked the structure to accommodate that, and then I just gave up on it altogether and created a triple feature for it, to kind of get more of those done. But the other thing that happened was I started thinking about like the difference between like a triple feature and a Damn You Hollywood. It's like Damn You Hollywood, I really want to attack the newest movies, but many of the newest movies that are that are in the national conversation, that are being talked about, that are up for awards, are on streaming services. These two, Don't Look Up and Being the Ricardos, are both like on the short list for Best Picture nominees.
And neither of which should even come close to taking that home.
Well, that's going to be a conversation we're going to have.
Just for the record, people, when we talk Best Picture, there's a lot that goes into being the best picture of the year.
It's not the most popular one. It's not going to be Spider-Man, you nerds.
You people. You know what? I'm very briefly going to do this. Just very briefly. All of you idiots whining about things you like not being recognized for awards. Don't watch the awards anyway. You don't care. Why do you want validation for them in that particular respect? What's the matter with you people?
The validation. That's the key word there. They want
the validation. You don't care about it anyway. You just want a bitch.
Okay. It's nice to be paid a compliment. Yeah. So if a stranger comes up to you and says, "Oh, you look very nice today," or that's a lovely shirt on you. Like, you don't care about that person or their opinion, but they said something nice about you, and so now you feel good about yourself. Well, that's essentially people's relationship to the Academy. They don't care about it. It certainly doesn't care about them. But if the Academy says Spider-Man's the best movie of the year, and it's your favorite movie of the year, suddenly you're less suicidal, I assume.
It doesn't make sense. If you don't care about award season, I'm not saying you should. Lord knows I haven't cared about the Oscars in at least 5 years.
Hang on. Now I remember what the second thing I wanted to tell you was. So many, many moons ago, we came up with this, and it was funny to me at the time. Obviously, it was funny to you, and so we just ran with it. We've been running with it ever since. We started calling the show Damn You Hollywood. I noticed today, and I hadn't noticed it before, because I had Sean on for the triple feature last night, and if you've ever done a show with Sean's language can be salty. All of us are, except for you. And that's because you're purposely trying not to be.
I try very, very hard to clean up my language, yes.
But yes, because of the YouTube monetization thing, I've really worked hard to not do it. Sunday night, and I don't want to tell other people, like, could you like cut it? Like, you've heard, like at this point, if you've heard me say I'm cutting back for the purposes of monetization, I would hope the signals to everybody else, maybe they should too, but I'm not about to start like making rules about it. So I just kind of go with the flow. But I was looking through the YouTube thing last night when I was putting it up, and I was looking at the cursing thing because Sean cursed a couple of times, and I was like, I don't know if this is going to fly. Let me look at what the specifics are. It specifically says, don't name your shows things with a curse word in it. Like damn. Like, how have we? And every single one of the Damn You Hollywood we've done, we're monetized. There's no problem with it, and it says it in the title. Damn You Hollywood, whatever stupid.
Look, the workings of YouTube are known only by madmen who have stared too long into the eldritch abyss where the outer things.
I came close to renaming the show because of it, and I was like, well, if they're not telling us to change it, I'm not going to change it now.
If they ask us to change it, we'll change it. Like, we'll come up with something else in a similar vein that expresses how we feel about the state of film in general and whatnot.
I'm going to start calling this critically acclaimed or Collider.
No, that would get you in trouble. I'd probably just change it to Hollywood Sucks.
It stinks.
Which just doesn't have the same kind of ring to it as Damn You. Like, there's a reason we stuck with this. And look, again, if they're not going to make a big deal out of it, I'm happy.
No, but it did amuse me, and so I just wanted to bring that up. Anyway, so yeah, back to this. We're looking at these, and I didn't want to spend a single show. Neither one of them, quite frankly, deserves an entire show. But there's also no money to talk about either. So on the occasion, the long way of saying something very obvious, on the occasion that there's material that lends itself to this format, we will continue to do these double up streaming shows, because I don't necessarily have to. I don't want to be locked into I have to find a third film.
Yeah.
When I just want to talk about two. So or I just want to talk about these movies with Robert. So there it is. I don't know. I don't think anyone else cares about how I structure my podcast. I'm like, oh my God, I just want to hear you talk about the movie already. But hey, this stuff matters to me, man. It matters.
So
there must be order.
As we start 2022, we've gone 10 and a half minutes.
Well, we haven't threatened a celebrity yet, so we're doing better than we did in 2015 and 2016.
Just wait. We'll get there.
Right. Speaking of threatening celebrities, let's talk about Don't Look Up by Adam McKay. Hey, Adam McKay, we reviewed The Big Short, which we both really liked.
I like the heck out of that movie. I still rewatch it from time to time. It's great.
Our review was very complimentary of it, and that's up now in the archives. It went up the week that this was in limited release in theaters. Did you see Vice?
I think so.
We never talked about it.
I know we didn't review it, but I think I saw. Yeah. I was not like McKay really peaked with The Big Short, and he's not quite been able to regain that level.
I saw Vice in the theater. I think I saw it on a date with Melissa, and I never thought to talk about it with you. There was probably something else. There was probably a Marvel movie or something that same week.
Almost
so I was like, well, priorities, and we weren't. And I wasn't quite the operation we've got going right now. So there just wasn't room or structure for it. But I liked Vice a lot. I thought Adam McKay certainly has a point of view and he has an agenda. And I think if you can just let go of that and accept that that's what it is, like the film was not, I think, unfair to Dick Cheney. It was unkind, but he has an unkind view of the man, and the man in some cases earned it. But I thought the thing about Adam McKay,
I remember that now.
The thing about Adam McKay movies is it's always a phenomenal cast putting their best foot forward, doing a phenomenal performance job.
It used to be.
The problem is Adam McKay's sort of approach to things tries people's patience, or at least some people's. There are people who I think appreciate Adam McKay and are in agreement with him, and so the film is their view of the film is artificially inflated because they agree with the man. If you disagree with him and the film isn't deftly handled, your perception of the film becomes much lower, and I think that's sort of the short story about Adam McKay.
I think that's where one of my big gripes with this movie comes from. One of the things I liked about The Big Short, while it did have a point of view to be certain, it was never, and you said this about Vice, and I do more or less agree with you, that it's never unfair. It's skewed to be certain, but that's inevitable when you tell someone else's story. Even when they tell their own story, it's going to be skewed. There's the closest you can get is just pure voyeuristic observation, and even that is colored by your perception of it. That's why the Heisenberg uncertainty principle exists in the first place.
Have you ever read any of the Bob Woodward presidential books, like Bush at War or the one he did on Trump? I read Bush at War just as another example in a different medium of somebody who he was given access. He wrote what he saw. He has a perspective, but Bush at War didn't always make Bush look terrible. It didn't make him look great either. But I think it was as close to an honest portrayal of what was going on in the White House at the time Bob Woodward was there. Yeah. And I kind of think that was Adam McKay's approach to Vice. Like he may not like he might have been motivated to tell that story of Dick Cheney because he doesn't like Dick Cheney, and people should know what a horrible human being he's perceived to be. But he did those things. Adam McKay showed that, and that's like there's no. It's like if you're going to do the story of Hitler, you kind of have to talk about the Holocaust. If you avoid it, you're missing a huge chunk of the story. Like you just can't talk about his veganism. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't tell his story just talking about his artwork.
Right.
You can't tell the story of Stalin, focus on the atrophying of his right hand. Like,
be some movie though, wasn't it?
the struggle of one man in a position of power to overcome the physical crippling of his main appendage. Like, no, you kind of got to talk about the millions and millions of people he brutally murdered and enslaved. Like, right. There's no getting around that. And I think my big gripe with Don't Look Up is that for a chunk of it, it is fair. Like, for a big chunk of this movie, it is satire in the way it's supposed to be done, in that it is happy to blast all sides.
All right, so you want to talk about what happens in this movie? This has got to be a short plot synopsis because there's not much plot here.
There really isn't.
This is more of, someone holding up the looking glass to the current national conversation, and specifically, and I did want to share this real quick just so people get an idea. Adam McKay said, quote, "The movie came from my burgeoning terror about the climate crisis and the fact that we live in a society that tends to place it as the fourth or fifth news story, or in some cases even deny that it's happening, and how horrifying that is, but at the same time preposterously funny." That's more or less the plot of this movie.
It is, and I think that's one of the reasons I take umbrage with the point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a big picture argument. He's drawing a real false equivalency with this particular film, and I have issues with it, but so you're correct about that. The plot goes as follows. Jennifer Lawrence and Leonardo DiCaprio discover a comet that is going to hit the Earth. And they tell the people that they're supposed to tell, who tell the people they're supposed to tell. They all fly out to the White House to try and talk to the president, played by Meryl Streep, whom I completely lost patience with about 4 years ago.
I loved her in this, but we'll talk about it.
I just... we can talk about it, but this is not an issue with her portrayal here.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like, okay, I know who you are now.
Okay.
And like, it's my baggage attached to her as an actress, not to her performance.
All right.
They finally get to talk to the president, who is more concerned with her Supreme Court nominee than the death of the planet.
And being reelected. That's a big part of her motivation.
Yeah, and the midterms coming up and everything. And they would rather not deal with this problem, so they push it off. The scientists talk with news outlets who run the story, and then other scientists, I'm going to save it for a very specific reason. They are somewhat shot down after the fact by other scientific organizations that disagree with their calculation of probability, because the math in this particular case comes out to not 100% probability that this is going to hit the Earth, but a 99.997, which you should just round up. It amazes to me that stupid people sometimes get caught up in the minutia when it suits them, but which is part of the point the movie's making here.
Yeah.
Like, you people couldn't round to save your life unless it serves your purpose. Eventually, however, this is inevitably confirmed by everyone, so the governments of the world kind of get together. The plan is to launch Ron Perlman into space, which we should do anyway, because he's a funny guy and he deserves a trip to outer space. I mean, why not? I love Ron Perlman. Don't give me that look. The plan is to launch him into outer space with a bunch of nukes and detonate them to deflect this particular comet, which they said was, what, 3 to 10 kilometers?
I thought it was like about 9 to 10 kilometers. But they said about the size of Mount Everest.
The one that famously impacted and allegedly killed the dinosaurs, and there's some scientific dispute about that, was about this size, about 6 miles wide all totaled. Which, again, is certainly enough to be a serious problem. That's their plan, but their plan is derailed by their very cheap imitation of Elon Musk and I can never remember the Apple douchebag, but him.
Oh, Steve something.
Jobs.
That's yeah.
It, thank you. So their unholy union of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk has had his own scientists look at this thing and determine that it's made of a bunch of rare earth minerals that are used in the manufacturing of all kinds of microchips and whatnot, and this thing's net value to the human race and to the planet is hundreds of trillions of dollars. And rather than simply deflect it, he wants to send up his own gadgets that will drill into it and break it up and then slow its descent through the atmosphere so that it's and also once there are a bunch of little ones instead of one big one, it's not nearly as much of a problem. It's not necessarily true, but that's kind of the point as well. Then we can all harvest this and we will all become so much richer, never minding the fact that the value of these things is driven by their scarcity. You can't dump this much of something that's not how markets work, idiots.
Well, there was a vested interest in just having the materials, even if everybody else made the leap to we'll all be zillionaires. All he was saying was the expense of making a cell phone will go higher because I'm lacking in the resources to make the chips and whatnot. This thing is full of the rare materials I need so we can continue to make cell phones, which is why he's a billionaire.
Yeah, so they try this. They abandon the plan to simply divert it. They try this. They go to try this plan instead. Leonardo DiCaprio, who has become slightly drunk on the fame of the celebrity status that he's been enjoying, decides to go along with it because the science is sound and he's popular all of a sudden. And
Cate Blanchett sleeping with him.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually he's confronted by the reality that, you know what, this isn't going to work. You've said a lot of nice things about this plan, but you've never had it studied. You've never had it peer reviewed. You've never actually done the work beyond random modeling. And I don't want humanity to die.
Yeah, I misinterrupted you, but I'm realizing that did come first because then him and Jennifer Lawrence go on a media campaign.
Yeah.
Being a little bit more schooled in media than when they first started, which is a big plot point. They go on a big media campaign, which inspires the rest of the world to
try their own
Plan A. Right.
So the Russians and the Indians try to launch their own deflection. And it goes badly. It just blows up on the launch pad. Meaning that with the time allotted, and the title of the book, Don't Look Up, comes from the notion that once this thing gets close enough, which it does at one point, you can see it in the sky.
Right.
And all you have to do is look up and see for yourself that this thing is going to hit us. And the political opposition, doing what all political opposition does at this point in time in our dumb culture, says don't look up.
Right.
So naturally, because the culture war is the culture war.
Yeah, Don't Look Up becomes the analog for the real life Make America Great Again. Right down to the red hats.
Yeah, and this goes badly once it becomes too much of an issue for even the people who support the president to avoid. The plan by said awkward billionaire fails spectacularly. And Jennifer Lawrence and Timothée Chalamet, who shows up to collect a paycheck, along with Leonardo DiCaprio, go back to his house he reconciles with his wife and his children. And they just decide, you know what? I think this is the best way for me to die. I would rather reconcile with my family and spend my last minutes here with everyone that I care about. The president and a bunch of other people get on a rocket ship that is launched into outer space. Eventually, they find another planet after being in cryosleep, losing some 40% of their people along the way. Then a bunch of naked old people wander around a new planet until all the carnivorous life forms over there attack them, and that's where we kind of end that. There's a post-credit scene where Jonah Hill climbs out of a pile of wreckage.
Yeah.
And says, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And it's the funniest thing in this whole stupid movie in some respects.
Let me before I get into my craft analysis, I did enjoy it. Look, whether or not you enjoyed the joke, it's fine. I did. I thought it was funny because you have the Jeff Bezos analog who says that my algorithms are more. He's doing the thing from Foundation, predictive psychology, where he's
sure.
like
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. Well, my algorithms tell me more about you than you know about yourself. And now fast forward to later on in the movie where he's talking to Meryl Streep, and it's almost like a gypsy conversation that they're having where she's asking him questions and he tells her, yeah, our algorithms that you're going to be eaten alive by a Rothloch. And
Bronterok.
A Bronterok. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And she was like, oh, okay. And she's like, that's weird. She's like, yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. The thing that eats her at the end of the movie is a Bronteroc.
Yeah, like it eats her, and everyone goes, well, what is that? And he goes, I guess that's a Bronteroc.
Right. It made me laugh. I mean, I'm dying to hear your issues with this movie. Here's my there are good, bad, and ugly things about this. I think as satire, it works very well.
This is if we're just talking satire, this is the best satirical movie in years.
This is right up there with Idiocracy and really being able to take the temperature of the national conversation and behavior and pointing at and saying this and holding up a mirror and saying this is what you are.
Yeah.
100%. And it reminds me of you. This is what you are, and I'm judging you for it. And I was like, okay, I'm with you, Adam McKay. It's way too long. I feel like I've been saying that a lot lately. It makes me sound like I only like 90-minute movies. Look, earn your runtime.
Yeah,
this thing is over. This is almost 2 hours and 20 minutes. It doesn't need you. This story was a 90-minute story. Yeah. This was not a 2.5-hour movie. And actually, I wanted to talk to you about this. I'm glad I said that out loud because it pinged something I wanted to bring up on the show. And I wanted specifically to talk to you about this. I think we're in, and it does relate to the craft of the movie, specifically the length. But I think we're at a tipping point or really a critical junction in how film is being developed now, because 20, 30 years ago, the studios who had more of an input in what films were made and how they were made, which is where we get the notes gag that we do, they were very heavily involved because you had to really work hand in hand with the theaters. To maximize profits in the theaters, you needed shorter movies that you can turn over like a restaurant. You know, the faster you can turn tables over, the more customers you have, the more money you make. The faster you can turn, the shorter a movie is, the shorter it takes to turn it over, clean the theater up and put more people in there, the more money you make as a theater.
Yeah, this is for the record, anyone who may not understand that, assuming your theater opens at 11, 10 or 11, which would be an early opening, but if you have a 90-minute movie versus a 2-hour movie, by the time you get to closing time, that almost allows for another showing, a whole other theater showing. So that's why you kind of wanted them to be a little bit shorter.
And it worked for everybody because, let's say, again, you have movies with shorter run times. You could run more movies without, you're always going to have your Warner Brothers and your Disneys and your Universals that want to take up more screen time with their movies, and they're paying, a premium to get those. But for more indie filmmakers, for indie studios, they want screen times too. So it worked out for everybody that if you had shorter movies, you could run more movies more often, and there was room for something extra, some indie art film, something from an independent studio, et cetera, et cetera. And then with the advent of the Marvel movies and some of these $200 million, almost 2.5 to 3 hour movies.
Hold on. Look, let's place. And we both love these movies, but if we're going to have the discussion about when this started tipping, the balance shifted with Lord of the Rings.
Okay, I didn't want to bring up Lord of the Rings because I feel like Lord of the Rings earned it. It was sort of a special case. Now, if you're citing it as a canary in the coal mine, fine. I'm not going to disagree with you.
Yeah, that's more what it is. Before that point, you wouldn't really see. It's not that you wouldn't see longer movies, but they were a little bit fewer and further between. They tended not to be the big blockbusters,
right,
in terms of budgets that were put into them, and they didn't really, and they very rarely were again the highest
specialty features for the most part.
And then
with 1 or 2 showings a day in the smallest theater possible, because who was going to go sit through a 3-hour movie? But then they made a 3-hour blockbuster, 3 of them.
Then they made a 3-hour blockbuster that made $800 million,
right,
and won Best Picture.
So, but yes,
I suppose
happens, and it's years later that it happens more often. And I'm just citing Marvel as probably the biggest example of this. They did it the most often. So my point is,
given how much content they churn out these days, and they almost seem to have a mandate on it being, I think they might have turned the bend on this in the following way. If we have a 3-hour movie and we know everyone wants to see it, well, then we can command a whole other screen that will push out a smaller film.
Here's where I'm going with this and how this relates to Don't Look Up. So it used to be the studios really pushed back on having your movie be 2.5 to 3 hours, which is why we have all these director's cuts out there. They were, it benefited everybody for the studio to say, knock this down to 2 hours. You crazy person. Your movie about Stalin's hand doesn't need to be 3 hours. Knock this down to 90 minutes to 2 hours. And later on, we'll put out a Blu-ray for the nerds who want to see, your 20-minute scene of the guy in the bathroom taking a poop. Fine. And that worked for everybody because they got to sell extra Blu-rays. People got to see extra footage. It was win-win all around. Here's what I'm trying to tell you. With the advent of streaming, you have a different set of circumstances going in the other direction, where now, one, streamers can set up independent contracts with any independent studio or production company they want. Adam McKay's weirdo production company who made this movie, they can just make a deal with him directly, say, here's X, go ahead and make your movie. And it benefits us if it's longer because that's more time. That's why they make House of Cards and Orange is the New Black, because if you can be on their service for 10 hours, that's beneficial to them. That's what they want. So now we talked about this with Martin Scorsese's The Irishman,
which is still going on, I think.
Which is interpretable. But even like El Camino, which I talked about last night, and some of these other ones, that's why I started to notice there's this huge trend where it doesn't seem like anyone's telling any of these filmmakers, cut your movie anymore. They're just shooting every single last reel of footage they can and throwing it all up on screen. And the only reason I know there's any editing going on is this movie was effing edited with a weed whacker. This is almost Batman v Superman levels of like cut to pieces. To the point where it's like ADD riddled.
In places, and we're going to have that same discussion about being the Ricardos, but that's a hallmark of Aaron Sorkin more than anything else.
So the long story short here is that there's no adult in the room telling a lot of these people your movie doesn't have to be 2.5 hours. And then I think the movie suffers for it. And then, like I said, they're encouraged to make the movie as long as possible because it benefits the streamer. Don't Look Up, I think, suffers from a lack of notes. Like normally we hate the studio because they keep pushing notes on a film and it makes it, and then you end up with a giant mechanical spider in your Western, or gay effeminate robots, whatever. And here I feel like there was no adult supervision. This was just Adam McKay having an Adam McKay time and not having to worry about screen turnover or studio notes or anything else. And it comes across while the point he's making in Don't Look Up, I think, is sound. And the performances, I think, by and large, are excellent for every actor's level of talent. So, like, Jonah Hill is playing Jonah Hill, but he plays a really great Jonah Hill, especially in that role. Sure. I think the movie as a film suffers because it's so long and so overindulgent, and you're just beating the same drum over and over and over again to the point where I don't care about your message anymore. This has gone on too long, and I need to do something else.
Yeah, I feel like the middle third of this film is a real drag.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in the sense that there's nothing happening, though there are segments, but there's a lot of just pointless repeated material.
Right.
And some of it is, again, I think it's the repetition that makes it so annoying. Very little of this is stuff that I think should be excised in whole. The bit where Leonardo DiCaprio starts kind of falling in love with the celebrity status. That's important to the story.
Yeah.
I don't need 5 different sequences of him enjoying himself. Like, okay, he's on Sesame Street, and he does the talk show with Cate Blanchett and Tyler Perry. Okay. I don't need to see him back there 3 more times. I don't need to see... I don't need 8 different versions of Jennifer Lawrence's life falling apart as she struggles with the existential horror.
They could have cut the Timothée Chalamet scenes entirely from the movie. You'd have lost nothing. And that's not a knock against him as an actor or his performance. It lended nothing to the movie. Her not being
hang on. One exception to that.
The thing you needed was her going to her parents' house and them saying, we're for the meteor, we want jobs, and you're not coming in unless you agree at least to not to talk about this. That was kind of all you needed with Jennifer Lawrence. And then I don't know if you're thinking of the same thing, but maybe the one sequence of her working in the liquor store.
No, I didn't need that. Like, I get why it's there and it's fine, but here's the only thing that Timothée Chalamet's character really added. And I bring it up because I think it's important.
Okay.
You can't have this movie, and let me put it like this about his character. I feel like his character is a studio note in the following way. If you're going to try and hold up this ugly mirror to society, which is most of what this film is, you need to have an earnestly religious person in there.
Okay, you don't think that could have been, they could have given all of Tom Bombadil's lines to somebody else?
Who else in this movie were you going to give that to?
I don't know, give it to Jennifer Lawrence.
She's not, no, her character's not, her character is designed to be the...
Give it to the NASA scientist then.
You could?
Who has one of the funniest lines in the movie when they're arresting him, and he's like, "Let's everyone calm down. I'm just a different pigment than you because my ancestors settled Mya and yours over Mya."
Yeah.
I laughed hard at that.
I might give you maybe him. I might be able to give you that one, but I think that his character serves the purpose of that final prayer sequence.
Okay.
And I think to the actor's credit, he does that quite well. That's not to say that elements of, I don't need him and Jennifer Lawrence making out 3 different times.
Yeah.
Like this badly needed to be cut down and reworked. I'm not disagreeing with you there. I'm saying that I don't hate the character entirely. I just think it badly needed revision.
Okay. We can quibble, but there's no point. We both are in at least in theme, in agreement that you needed to lose several minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
Stuff needed to be cut out. There's a lot of repetition here. And it's frustrating because, I mean, this might be a disagreement between you and I, but I read a book a little ways back about, Republicans' war against science. And it talked about, it talked about climate deniers and stuff like that. And I think it is a serious subject that at least needs to be addressed. There needs to be a sober conversation about it. And,
I agree.
And the movie speaks to that. There's specifically in one of the montages of them doing media where the NASA scientist and Jennifer Lawrence are talking, are doing the nighttime political talk show, talking head thing. And they're going up against the conservatives who show up later in the movie. And the conservatives are like making straw man arguments and gaslighting. And finally, the NASA scientist just leans over and is like, "Will you please grow up?" And that's all true. That's the kind of thing that happens. Is you have somebody who, I can't remember, and I've brought this up before, and I can't remember where my friend got it from, but this is the mid 90s, so you'll have to forgive my old memory. But there's somebody who's talking about something very scientific and very specific, and there's like a sock puppet arguing with him, and and it's like, if your daughter was thirsty, would you not bring her a glass of water? And then the conservative, "Shut your stinking trap," and everybody in the audience cheers, because they're cheering for the line, "Shut your stinking trap." Shut your stinking trap was the predecessor to fake news. So that's how far back that goes. Anyway, my point being, like, there's a lot of truth in this movie. There's a lot of stuff that I thought was resonant, but it gets lost. It's kind of like arguing with my dad, where like the point you're making may be sound, but A, you've gone on too long about it. B, you sound like a jerk and you're insulting in the way that you're doing it. You're not trying to win friends and influence people with your argument here. So no one's going to listen to you, even if it's even if it's against their own best interest. There's a way to get people to listen to you without being an ass about it. And that's kind of the other problem with this movie is, yes, Adam McKay, you're so smart, you're so pretty. The point you're making is very sound. Maybe people would listen to you if you were less an ass about it.
He's a little up his own ass.
Yeah.
And I think here's my other big problem with this. And one, the devastating potential of a celestial body of the size that he chose. It's clear he didn't want to go like the Armageddon route. It's the size of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
But by making it the size that he did, that's clearly enough to cause serious damage and potentially wipe out a giant portion of life on Earth. It's not enough to do what this movie shows it doing.
So I have a question, Mr. Wizard, because something about this movie kind of confused me. A meteor or a comet the size of a mountain range hits the desert, pushes enough dust and rock into the atmosphere to which, it makes it unbreathable for X amount of time, as I understand it.
What you get is nuclear winter, right? You get enough material launched into the upper atmosphere that it actively cools the surface of the planet by a couple of degrees, and then all hell breaks loose.
Okay. And what the movie's contention is that this thing's going to hit the Pacific Ocean. It's going to cause a number of tsunamis. Mm-hmm. I get most of many coastlines would have been underwater, but I feel like, and this is why I'm asking because I really don't know, that if it hits the water, I don't think it ends life as we know it on surfing.
The one that, for those unaware, the meteor impact that we track that, again, was... There's an argument about whether or not it killed the dinosaurs or not. At this point, a lot of the thought process is no, it didn't. It happened around the same time, but they were already on the decline for other reasons.
I was going to say, I thought a lot of it was that's not so much that it killed every dinosaur that was walking, so much as it destroyed enough of the ecosystem they couldn't feed themselves and died off.
But the part of the problem with that analysis is that if you dig down into the fossil layer, right, you can see the line of ash and whatnot that was deposited after that thing hit. There's no dinosaur bones above it. Mm-hmm. They're all below it. So they must have already been, pretty seriously in decline before that. Right. It hit off the Yucatan Peninsula. It hit in the Gulf of Mexico. Part of the reason that would still do that, Mark, do you know how deep the ocean is?
Very.
It's not quite as deep as you think.
Oh, there's no monsters with giant flashlights on their head? No krakens?
No. If something 6 miles wide were to hit, it would probably, with that impact, it would still hit the ocean bedrock.
Okay, and that's what you're contending, is that it would push the sediment from the ocean bedrock up into the atmosphere.
It also, given the heat that it coming through the atmosphere, it flash boils a lot of the water, even seawater, as it hits. Right. Again, the amount of force being hit is catastrophic. Like it would still have essentially the same impact.
So I cut in with my question when you were trying to make a point of why some of what he talks about in terms of science doesn't work the way that the movie says it does. So make your point there really, really quick.
Yeah, the devastation shown at the end, I don't think is accurate.
Okay.
They call this at one point, the NASA scientist calls this a planet killer. Mm-hmm. If this is the same size as the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, just for the sake of argument, let's just phrase it like that. Guess what happened after the dinosaurs were wiped out?
What, Robert?
Life continued.
Life finds a way.
It did not kill the planet.
Right.
One that size would not render the planet uninhabitable.
Okay.
It would royally mess everything up, and humanity might not survive. This is not me saying otherwise. This is me saying that the planet dealt with an impact like that before, and life continued in its aftermath. So
I know some scientists have weighed in on the movie, and I think some may have spoken to that. I think a lot of people are willing to, don't know the specificity of what a planet killer is versus not, what an impact the meteor that size would have, nor does anyone really care for the most part. I mean, some scientists gave opinions on the matter, gave some interjection, but for the most part, people watched this passively and came away with one or two reactions. It was, I loved it, you're dead on, go Adam McKay. Other people, it pissed them off. Maybe it was too revealing of their own selves. It was too self-critical. And they didn't like seeing themselves made fun of that way, or are getting so sick and tired of seeing themselves made fun of that way that they just lash out at everything that comes across uncritically. Where I'm landing with this, so we can wrap this discussion, is that as a film, as a piece of art, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It's well acted.
Yeah, look, I'm about to give
Okay,
my other big I'm about to give my other big criticism of this thing, and
Mhm.
it's I understand the artistic logic of likening a meteor to climate change.
Mhm.
Here's the problem. One of these things is a deeply complicated, nuanced problem.
Right.
One of these things is not. A big rock that's going to smash into the planet with enough force to render it uninhabitable for humanity for hundreds of years, if not longer, is an unambiguously negative thing that must be dealt with as swiftly as possible. Now, you, listener, might be going, but isn't the changing climate of the planet very similar? Yes and no. Yes, it's something that we need to be cognizant of. Yes, it's something we need to be aware of. But it's also tied intrinsically to a myriad of more complicated, complex areas than just big rock flying through space.
In defense of quote unquote climate deniers, let me say this. There have been dire predictions on the end of humanity having already happened since at least the 60s. There were entire books written about it.
Oh, people in the 60s were claiming that in the 90s Miami would be underwater.
Yeah, there have been books written about the food shortages that are going to happen, super criminals. You know, when it was just global warming, there was stuff about that. This planet was supposed to have died at least 2 to 3 times in my lifetime alone. I'm born 1976. So, as politicians who are charged with trying to make sober decisions with the best information possible, and there's a history of both some scientists getting it right and some not so much, but everyone speaking loudly about it, it's hard to argue against there being a healthy dose of cynicism. And I think the movie lacks any of that insight as to why that might be. It just says smart people say smart stuff, we should believe them religiously, which is not safe either.
It's really not. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. That's, I think, my biggest problem with what the movie. Now, if the movie were just one of the things about you brought up Idiocracy. One of the things about Idiocracy is that it is incredibly. This is gonna sound really weird. It's apolitical only in the sense that it has no stance on the American like false dichotomy that goes into our two-party fallacy, right? It's not saying boo one side, yay the other side. It's going, boy, we're idiots.
Yeah.
And look what happens if we continue down this path of idiocy.
Yeah, it's very much predictive of what at the time was our current stupidity. It was like it almost as if to say liberals will land here, conservatives will land here, the vast majority will land here, and these are the things that are going to happen on our current path.
And boy, are we all just dumber by the time we get there.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I think this movie lacks, is that it takes too strict a point of view on that. It tries too hard to lean into things that we know are problematic when properly employed in real life. The message of Idiocracy is, please devote a little bit of time to your education and your common sense.
Right.
Which is something that everyone should be putting some effort into. That's a universal and ambiguous good.
Right.
When it comes to this is my problem with, again, trying to make kind of a straight one-to-one from climate change to rock in the sky. The science around rock in the sky is very, very clear. The science around climate change alters on a daily basis, it seems.
Well,
and hang on, as a point of view, the climate on this planet has changed ever since the volcanoes started erupting and the atmosphere formed. Right? The climate now is not what it was. We brought up the dinosaurs during the Cretaceous, which is not what it was during the Jurassic. It changes. The question becomes, A, how much impact does humanity have on it?
Mm-hmm.
B, what, if anything, can actually be done about it in a real way?
I need to weigh in on something. I'm sorry.
Hang on, let me finish. Yeah. C, what is the real world cost associated with any of plans than what effect they might have. All wrapped up in D, which is partially we're all idiots, and how unrealistic we are about certain aspects of this. People whine about species going extinct, and people try to use this as a benchmark for how bad things are getting. I have news for people. 90% of all species that have ever existed on the planet have gone extinct. This is what happens.
I need to weigh in here.
Yeah.
There's something people need to understand about the climate change debate. It is a political debate, and here's why it's political. Many of the solutions for climate change have an economic impact. You started to allude to this, but it needs to be said very directly. When the way to curb climate change is to curb behavior. The way that you enforce behavior change is through law. That's how civilization is set up. The problem with that, and this is why you have a lot of conservative objection to it, which tends to favor business, is every time you enact one of these laws, it has a financial impact on business, many of which crumble under the weight of it all. It's also, and this gets a little in the weeds, and I really don't want to discuss it much further than the laws are not distributed evenly or fairly. What is said to have to be done in France and the United States is not said to have to be done in India and China. And in China
they're putting in one fossil fuel power plant per person these days.
So the point being is that it isn't so much you have people denying climate change on a religious basis, or being evil about it. It's like, hey, before we cause IBM to go out of business, how about we look at what it is we're doing, make sure it's fair across the board, and make sure we're not doing things like that. And the problem is, before you decide that banning plastic straws is the way to go about cleaning up the ocean, maybe look into where 90% of the 80 plus, more than that actually, the United States is responsible for less than 2% of all plastic waste that gets dumped into the ocean, and yet Seattle's banning plastic straws. Good on you, you did something. Right? And the gaslighting, and strawman arguments go both ways, because when a sober-minded conservative says, "Hey, it's not that we don't want to do anything about climate change; it's that we don't want to run screaming into the dark about it. Let's do this in a sober and safe and conservative manner." And I mean conservative in the don't make drastic change. Make conservative as opposed to radical, not conservative as opposed to liberal in this case. And then the liberals say, "Why do you hate the children?" Because I've met your children, first of all. Anytime someone does something like that, but won't you think of the children? I've met your children. We're better off without them. The point is, they go, "Why do you hate children? Why do you hate fresh air and clean water?" And it's like, that's not anything of what they just said. So that's not the point. The point is, listening to this who's like a hardcore liberal, your side does this shit too. Please, let's get a grip. What was the other thing if you want a nice little litmus test about whether someone is serious about dealing with climate change, ask them their stance on natural gas and nuclear power. Anyone who says they want to shut those down is not serious about it. And there's a gag line from this is a deep cut, but there's a gag line from the movie Volcano. It stars Tommy Lee Jones that came out in the 90s. Oh, it's great. I love that movie. There's 2 bits of CGI that just hurt my soul, but I've seen that movie a bunch of times. For what it is, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. There's a line where a couple of characters are arguing, and they're arguing about putting a subway extension in Los Angeles. And one of the characters says, "Fine, let's do everything your way." "Oh, what's my way?" We'll level every building over 2 stories tall, and we'll all go back to horse and buggy. And I feel like there's a contingent of the more extreme left these days. Right. That's the argument they're making. Right. Yeah. We should have no cops, buildings, businesses, or money, and everyone should live in a cave. It's like, and for some reason, the people from the senator from Hawaii supports this. We shouldn't have air travel. Okay. And here's the thing. That goes for you. You can wish that, and you can scream on television and put stuff on Twitter. It's not no one's going to listen to you. No sober-minded adult is going to listen to crazy talk. Yeah. So anyway, the point that I wanted to get to is I'm wondering if the whole film, and this is the last thing I want to say about this, and then I want to move on. I wonder if the film is better served if Meryl Streep doesn't do the whole bit of let's assess it, let's reassess. Cut that entirely out and have her just go, have her be a little less Trumpy and a little bit more a little bit more Bush Senior, a little bit more Reagan, and have her go, I believe you. You're with the guy that I trust at the very least. You have a rabbi in this particular case who's vouching for you. I will assume you're telling the truth. And when he says, hey, we got to get the nukes in the air and deflect this thing, and we need to do it now before our window of opportunity passes. And she's like, I'm all in. And then the Jeff Bezos thing happens where she's like, hold the phone. Our geologists say that we've got untold amounts of minerals that we need to make cell phones. And, seeing as I funded your campaign, maybe you ought to listen to me. And she's going, well, it's two different smart people, and one of them gives me money. I'm going to go with the second guy, not the first. I think it's a bit of a stronger movie. The fact that we waste 20 to 30 minutes on her hemming and hawing because that's the perception of what our leaders do, and in some cases what they actually do, not take a stand on things. I took it as a knock against Bush for Katrina, which not saying everything was handled the right way, but that's also been wildly misconstrued and reported as far as how he handled things and his lack of handling things through the Katrina crisis. Not going to get into it. Go read something. But the perception by the media and then told as the story was that Bush mishandled the entire Katrina thing, waited too long, and a lot of people died. And that's the end for me, at least. That's what I feel like Adam McKay was drawing on as an analog of her going, I don't want to deal with any of this right now. Here's my stupid excuse for it. And it's like, how about we just cut that out entirely and not make her a complete idiot? I think it's a stronger. I think it's a stronger story, and I think she's a stronger character.
I think I'm going to disagree slightly. I'm okay. I'm okay with her being, head in the sand like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of things I think that detract from the strength of the overall script that you could fix by making her a stronger character, but by making her a stronger character, I think bits of the satire die.
I feel like the satire is not the strongest pillar of this movie. I think first make good film, then have good satire, not the other way around.
Which is fair. I mean, as far as if I were to try and fix this, I would shorten the window between we're going to have our people look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I might have her be a bit more competent in the general sense, but them being in there and her going, okay, you brought this to our attention. Thanks. We're going to, we appreciate what you've done.
We'll get back to you.
And then them going, but don't you want, and their reaction needs to be a bit disproportionate.
Mm-hmm. Well, they have a disproportionate. See, Jennifer Garner yells out, we're all going to die in the restaurant, and the riot breaks out.
That's much
Keep that. That's fine.
No, that's fine, but that's also in the third act rather than in the first.
That's like
nope.
That's earlier in the film than you're making it out to be.
That barely the halfway point.
Okay.
It's not what you think it is. The first thing they do is they go to that newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
They do the whole media thing before,
right.
Which should tell you how stupid and repetitive parts of this movie are. That all of this blurs together.
Yeah.
So again, I would have her response still be maybe a bit on the dismissive side, like I've got other things to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have a look at this and we'll get back to you. And here's the other thing about that. If you've got Jonah Hill being Jonah Hill and you just desperately want to push him in front of a bus for this entire movie, I think maybe you let him be a bit more of an antagonist to our scientists instead of just a pointless lackey.
Yeah, he let him be the general whispering in Bill Pullman's ear in Independence Day about National Security Secretary.
Sure.
Rather.
I mean, look, here's the thing about his character. If you want to talk about characters that could be cut from this and lose nothing, you could cut Jonah Hill entirely.
You absolutely could cut Jonah Hill, but that's one of Adam McKay's babies, isn't it?
I need my Jared Kushner.
Yeah, I need my toady in the White House that I could make fun of, and it's like,
look, this is my avatar for all the Trump children, and aren't I just so clever? And again, his character is utterly vestigial. to the story and to everything that's going on. Either he needs to be more of an antagonist or he needs to be gone. So he's a problem. I really, again, I think you need to make the scientists a bit more hysterical. Like the president says, okay, we'll get back to you. We're going to run some numbers. Don't tell anyone. You have Jonah Hill. If you want to keep Jonah Hill, he's a bit snotty. He's more dismissive. Our scientists decide to freak out and start telling everyone. Then when the president pulls them in and goes, you idiots. Okay, you decided to try and be the public face of this. Now guess what you get to do? Right. Like, there's ways to smooth this whole thing out that were...
And I think another pass, I think an executive producer, for the studio who says, hey, not just liberals are going to watch this thing, you dick. Try a more even look. If you're so damn worried that you've made a cautionary tale, try to reach everybody, not just your people you're friends with, which I think is probably the biggest criticism I have of this movie is
once we get
only speaking to one half of the country.
Once we get to the point where hey, let's organize fundraisers and concerts, once we get to that point, we've lost the plot here.
Yeah.
So I think the last thing I want to say, I mentioned this briefly, but the acting, especially from DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence, is exceptional.
Yeah.
I mean, DiCaprio in particular, he delivers a really great performance here.
He's one of the best actors. I mean, I'm going to make I really do need to upload the Homer Simpson hot take thing, but hot take. I think he's this era's De Niro and Hooah.
Pacino.
Thank you. Yeah, De Niro and Hooah. De Niro and Pacino. I think he's this generation. I think him, Daniel Day-Lewis, a couple of the other contemporaries are the finest actors of that generation.
He's definitely up there, and I appreciate that. I appreciated at the end of the movie that one of the things they wanted to drive home was our point of view characters essentially take stock of what's going on and realize what are the most important things in life.
Yeah.
The ending of this movie, and look, first of all, I want to applaud any film that has the balls to end the world. If you want to threaten the world, that's a trigger you've got to be willing to pull as an artist. Otherwise, the audience won't go along with you when you threaten it.
As a Chekhov's gun thing, they had to end it the way they did. My preference would have been the ship gets hit by an asteroid mid-flight and just never makes it to its destination.
I mean, look, if you want to know my preference, what really would have made me laugh, if it misses them.
Oh.
The end is it's close, but it misses.
Yeah, and after the ship has already taken off and we've gotten rid of the worst people on the planet, kind of a thing. All right. Again, make your point. So that would
have made me laugh more than anything else. But I liked it's rare in these movies that you actually get a kind of wholesome, touching, emotionally resonant kind of conclusion. I mean, even other movies that have actually had kind of the stones to actually end the world. I mean, if you have the taste for it for sitting through Melancholia, it does, and it has a slightly similar ending. Knowing has a similar ending, and of course, Knowing also has the alien subplot, which is just, God, that movie could have been so much better. Anyways, but putting forth the point that your family and the people you love are what matters,
right?
And it's better, and there is value and righteousness in simply staying with them in the face of death rather than abandoning them in a cheap attempt at preserving your own life.
That's fair. All right. And with that said, let us talk some Rotten Tomatoes.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
The critical review of Don't Look Up is brought to you by Grammarly. For you listeners of Damn You Hollywood, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Adam McKay. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere you write on the web. Adam McKay. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. Adam McKay. To download Grammarly today, what rhymes with McKay? Go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, it's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free. Adam McKay.
Look, when we're talking about the need for style improvements, we'll get to that in a second. Sorkin.
So Sorkin-y. All right. So the critics are split on this one. This ended up with a rot with a splat. 234 reviews. This comes in at 56%.
I imagine a lot of them had the same problems we did.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised at the audience score either. I mean, look, I've not made any great secret of this. I don't talk politics here unless it's relevant to what we're discussing. I tend to lean more right. I still laughed at parts of this movie.
Yeah. I the feedback that I've gotten is that the critics were kind of torn on it, but I think like the movie is by and large entertaining. I think I think if most people who aren't as invested in the film as we are probably didn't mind the length. I mean, they probably they watched it during some downtime over the holiday weekend when it came out.
You want to know how what happens with most of those people, and I don't mean this negatively because this is a deliberate thought process you have to beat into your head. They probably came out, they probably remembered all the laughs and parts of the satire and whatnot, and for a chunk of them, they probably agreed with the entire point of view that's being presented.
Right.
And then, 3 weeks later, when someone asks them about it, they might go, "Oh man, but that was a bit long." Like it's a reality that just doesn't necessarily dawn on you unless you really think about it in the moment.
Right. So the critics' consensus reads, Don't Look Up aims too high for its scattershot barbs to consistently land, but McKay's star-studded satire hits its target of collective denial square on.
Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to mention about this movie. So hang on, I apologize. This was a note that I had about The Craft. If this movie wanted to be this long, it needed to be more of an ensemble feature, and we needed like two other characters to follow through the middle to kind of at least keep you interested in what's going on. That's one of the things that The Big Short did well. You had three different groups of people to follow at different times, so you never got bogged down in the weeds too much about what any of them is doing at any one point.
Yeah. All right. So this first one, this first one is interesting.
Oh, that second one is hilarious.
That second, yeah. I'm going to read that second one out loud. Just give me a second. Mark Mizoros of the News Herald, Willoughby, Ohio. Ideally, Don't Look Up would make you laugh and inspired to learn more about climate change. As it is, it just mostly makes you tired.
You're not wrong, sir. You are not wrong.
Kent Garrison of Mad About Movies podcast. I want your numbers, sir. I want your numbers. I want to know how you landed on Rotten Tomatoes. Show me your papers. Don't Look Up is 2021's Mars Attacks. All right.
I don't think that's an accurate conclusion, but that's funny.
Matt Neal of Movies Ate My Life. Stupidest names. Dear Adam McKay, if someone doesn't like your movie, it doesn't necessarily mean they didn't get it. Thanks.
You know what? That's not a splat, that's a fresh review, but you know what? I appreciate him saying that because so many people, like, that's your defense. I didn't really enjoy your movie. Well, you must not have gotten it. No, I got all 2.5 hours of it, buddy.
Oh my God, that was the whole Elizabeth Bank thing, wasn't it? With Charlie's Angels. It's like, we didn't like your movie. Well, clearly you hate women. No, Elizabeth. Big space in between those 2 points. Ruben Peralta Regard of Coca Lecus? Sure. It's not subtle, but like the killer in Seven said, you can't just tap people on the shoulder anymore. You have to hit them with a sledgehammer.
I appreciate the reference to a much better movie. But, I mean, look, satire hasn't been subtle in what's the primary movie we referenced here? Idiocracy?
Well,
and nothing subtle about that.
Well, to be fair, I mean, Mel Brooks did satire, and parody, and in one of his greatest movies, a black guy walks across the screen with a boombox on his shoulder in the middle of the Roman Empire.
I mean, to be fair, hang on. To be fair, the best moment of satire in the history of Mel Brooks is Gene Wilder pulling the sheriff out from behind the rocks, and he says to a pair of anachronistic members of the Klan, "Where the white women at?"
Right. So again, I mean, we're talking late 70s, early 80s here. It's been this way for a while.
You, sir, are used to, I don't know what type of films you're used to reviewing, but satire like this has never been subtle.
Sean Edwards of Fox 4 Kansas City. If I wanted to get preached at, I'll just go to church. Fire this man from reviewing movies. Put him back in the weather where he belongs.
Okay, again, while I don't disagree with the sentiment, that is a deeply unhelpful review. This is a fairly textbook instance of finding a decent point to make about the film, but getting lost trying to reference how it pertains to the film being good or bad.
Matt Pies of mattpies.com agrees with this. It's the new Idiocracy we deserve. Terrific.
This is not as good as Idiocracy, just for the record, everyone.
We got to go to Starbucks. I don't really need a hand job right now. All right.
See?
So good. Asher Liberto of LA Weekly. Remember when McKay was making movies like Step Brothers? Now he's making movies like Vice and Don't Look Up. Glib, unfunny infomercials that are closer to TED Talks than Talladega Nights. Aww.
I mean, to be fair, Step Brothers is deeply unfunny too.
Oh my God, Step Brothers is terrible. That's the kind of movie that my wife likes, and she's allowed to like it. She's not criticizing these things. She's looking for 90 minutes of mildly stupid entertainment. Fletcher Powell of KMUW Wichita Public Radio.
That's gotta be a pseudonym. Like that. That's gotta be.
Yelling, "Look at all the dum-dums," cannot be the basis for successful satire. It's a bit undercutting of the movie.
Well, first of all, it can. Second of all, again, I think you're kind of one of these people who maybe felt that this cut a little bit too close to home, and you're taking it out on the film in unfair ways. Like, if what you're trying to say is your satire should be subtle, I'm not saying satire can't be subtle. I'm saying it doesn't have to be. This is not a genre requirement. And if your response to, again, maybe feeling a little bit hit close to home on some of what you saw is, well, couldn't you have at least been subtle, smile when you call me that kind of stuff? Like, that's not a commentary on the movie. That's a commentary on you.
Gary M. Kramer of Salon.com, top critic.
That utter waste of space in the publication era.
Oh, this is great. You're going to love this.
I really am.
Don't Look Up makes a few decent points and gets a chuckle or two, but mostly it's leaden when it could be farcical, sluggish when it could be screwball. The end. This end of the world comedy should have just been more fun. Gag me with a spoon, says Mark Radulich of Damn You Hollywood.
Because really, what I want with my apocalypse is a lot of good laughs.
Yeah.
I needed a Carrot Top cameo is what I needed here.
I needed this. I needed Rick Moranis to say he couldn't breathe in his mask.
Look, I'm also not disagreeing with some of the points made, but I think what you're arguing at that point is purely personal preference about the style, not a legitimate criticism about the film. Like, you could do it. This could be a more screwball comedy. Might have been funnier as a general rule, but that's just the writer and the director's artistic style. That's not, like, they weren't trying for screwball and missed.
Right.
Your commentary is just, well, I wish this was a different movie, and that's not fair criticism.
Someone hid Rosie Fletcher's Xanax, and she's tweaking.
Oh, really?
Yes, someone get her a Klonopin right quick. Think of it like a massive Hollywood Christmas special where the top talent comes together to scream, "We're all going to fucking die," at the top of their lungs. Amen to that.
I mean, okay, I've got bad news for everybody. Nobody gets out of life alive.
Spoilers.
The only universal constant to life is that it ends. You are going to die at some point in time. Deal with it.
Manola Dargis of New York Times, top critics, will be the last one because we have to move on.
That former newspaper.
Yeah. In the end, McKay isn't doing much more in this movie than yelling at us, but then we do deserve it. All right. That's not helpful.
That is deeply unhelpful. And if you just want physical abuse, give me your address. I'll come over there and kick your ass for free.
Okay. So your brother's weighing in here. It says Blazing Saddles is one of the greatest satire films ever.
He is correct.
You can find better 90 minutes of mindless entertainment than Step Brothers. And then he put up an emoji and says newspapers.
Well, the New York Times in particular.
All right, let's move on to Being the Ricardos. So, Being the Ricardos came out briefly.
This movie hurt me more than Don't Look Up for a variety of reasons.
December 7th, it landed on Amazon Prime. December 21st, it was released briefly in wide release. December 10th for like a week, but the whole thing was it was an Amazon Prime exclusive. It was released in theaters because it was competitive for prizes.
Yeah,
some
of which it should win, or at a bare minimum be nominated for. Like, there's elements of this movie that are very good.
So Aaron Sorkin,
you just deflated my balloon.
Writer and director of The Trial of the Chicago 7, which was also an Oscar contender. Molly's Game.
Hang on. When you talk about The Trial of the Chicago 7, it was an Oscar contender. You have to put the air quotes there.
Okay, contender. He's written A Few Good Men, Malice, The American President, The Rock, Bulworth.
It was a contender like Marlon Brando was a contender. He could have been.
Enemy of the State, Charlie Wilson's War, which is awesome. The Social Network, Moneyball, and Steve Jobs. He's known in many ways for his television that he written, executive produced, and created, such as Sports Night, which I eventually want to talk about with Gavin. The West Wing, which is like everyone's favorite show.
Hold on. No. The West Wing was everyone's favorite show before that generation started dying off about 10 years ago.
Okay. Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. The Newsroom,
which really should have lasted long. Hang on. Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip should have lasted a lot longer than it did. That show was done dirty.
I never saw it. I did see The Newsroom though. That's a weird ending, but for them, I like The Newsroom. I enjoyed watching
Of course you did.
And he's written up a whole bunch of plays, whatever. So Aaron Sorkin is best described as somebody who I think excels in sharp dialogue.
Allegedly.
That's kind of what he's known. I mean, it might not be your West Wing. That's a weird way to spell The Wire. I love your brother. He's invited for Christmas dinner next year. I'm sending him a ticket. Anyway, Aaron Sorkin is again best known for sharp, witty dialogue.
Dang it! Now I'm just sad that Martin Sheen never cameoed in The Wire.
He definitely is another one with a very political point of view. There's a lot of stuff related to that. He tends to be a little less preachy than some of his compatriots, but he has his moments as well. And
depends on Sorkin. Sorkin is very era driven, by which I mean the following: 15 years ago, give or take, 20 years ago, I think he was a lot less than he is now. Now that he's getting older and he sees that his talent is slipping.
It's like I think him, Ridley Scott, Martin Scorsese, they need a support group. And I want a support group as a podcast.
Sorkin is in no way, shape, or form nearly as talented as those other two.
Well, no, but they're all like bitching and complaining these days.
True.
They're all grandpas with social media and getting themselves into trouble. Anyway, so Being the Ricardos is about a week in the life of the making of the show I Love Lucy, and it starts off with Lucy is accused of being a communist, even though that she's been cleared by the federal government. Also, her husband's cheating on her. Also, her marriage is in tatters. Also, and it's just from the table reading to the filming of the episode, we get a look at what made that particular week particularly contentious in the life of Lucille Ball. There's also a lot of flashbacks. Anything else?
Well,
I mean,
hang on.
go
The
ahead.
entire framing device for this is the kind of faux mockumentary style,
Yeah.
which
Okay,
then
just-
lead. Which
Just
lead.
go
Hang
into
on.
your plot synopsis. I would say just go into the plot synopsis.
Well, again, our framing device here is a mockumentary, where people who used to work on I Love Lucy reminisce about the week where Lucille Ball was accused of being a communist. So we can flash back to the filming of the show, which itself has flashbacks to earlier points in their lives. And Aaron Sorkin, you're not nearly as talented as Christopher Nolan in dealing with time in film.
I really need to get to the craft review so that I can scream about the incessant use of flashback in this movie.
I hated it.
I know.
So we follow again Lucy being it is intimated by a popular news radio personality that Lucille Ball's a communist. Desi Arnaz tries to squash this. They're trying to film the show. Right around this time, we reveal that Lucille Ball is pregnant. They goes through them reworking some famous gags from the show. We get flashbacks to how Lucy became a star to begin with. We get her being concerned that Desi is cheating on her, which he is. We get the awesomeness of J.K. Simmons.
J.K. Simmons, one of the best actors of our age.
No kidding. And you know what kills me about this? All culminates with Desi Arnaz coming up with a scheme whereby, okay, so they've outed you as a potential communist, even though you've been cleared because the media, even back then, was an unscrupulous bunch of parasites. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to invite some members of the press. I'm going to introduce you to the crowd, and they're going to cheer you, and everyone's going to realize nobody cares.
Yep.
They actually cut, because that's what happened. The best line from what Desi Arnaz said to the studio audience was cut out of this script. He got up there, and one of the things he said to the people was, the only thing red about Lucille Ball is her hair, and that's not legitimate. Because she was her red hair was a dye job.
Right.
Which is a great line. Like, how could you... That man came up with that and said it. How could you cut that? He gets J. Edgar Hoover, or at least someone voice acting J. Edgar Hoover, on the phone to say that Lucy's been cleared. She gets applauded. She confronts him about his cheating. He cops to it. They both agree to just kind of go on with the show. And we close with the title card, with the placard saying that Lucy filed for divorce the day after their final performance together in like 1960.
So I want to echo something you said, and Sean actually thought it was a great line because I shared it with him last night. This movie doesn't deserve this cast.
Nope.
This is an outstanding cast.
This script does not deserve these performances.
J.K. Simmons, Nicole Kidman, Javier Bardem, everyone in this movie gives stellar Oscar-worthy performances. The script is not nearly as good as their performances. Like it,
nowhere close.
Like if so, we talk. Us nerdy, hoity film people use words like elevated. There was this script. It was elevated by the performance, and somebody who makes like belts for a living or something would be like, "What do you fuck you mean elevated? What does that even? This is elevated.
Yeah, this
is not a good script." But because the performances are so good, when you're watching it, it feels better than it actually is.
Again, if you want to know what it means for an actor's performance to elevate something that is substandard, imagine someone else doing it.
Mm-hmm.
There's
imagine the same movie, but it's the cast of 90210.
Yeah, like what's your opinion then, right?
Right.
Because that's all we have as far as the script goes and whatnot. It's a joke. It's terrible. So imagine this is an arrow insert, right?
So remember I said before about movies are not earning their length. This one's also over 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Did not need it.
What the hell, people? The flashbacks lended nothing to this movie. Like to me, if you're trying to make sort of like a Ray or a Johnny or a Walk the Line, where it's the or like a Bohemian Rhapsody, where it's the beginning to the end of someone's career from birth to death. Okay, fine. And if the idea here is to show how Lucille Ball became Lucille Ball, if that's your premise, and you want to keep jumping back and forth between this one recording of I Love Lucy and how she got to that point and then what happened after, fine, but that's not really what the movie is trying to do. The movie is trying to talk about the end of her marriage.
This movie's trying to talk about way too much.
Well, my wife, actually, I'm always like, she's like always my analog for, Johnny Lunchpail, who doesn't think too hard about these movies. She's actually the one who hit me to the jive. She was like, do you not understand what, because I was complaining about this movie as we were watching it. Like, if this movie is supposed to, my contention was that this was that because she's on the verge of losing her career because she's being reported as being a communist, and then this is an era where if you're a communist, the ground just falls out from under you and you fall into the abyss. And how much pressure she's putting on herself and everyone around her because she feels like her entire career, she may never go to prison for this, but she may lose the American people, and without the American people, there is no I Love Lucy, there is no Lucille Ball. That was, to me, what the movie was about. My wife's like, no, you're missing the point. The movie is about the end of her marriage. And she does say several times throughout the movie, you have to save my marriage. He says it to Tony Hale's character. And when I realized that that's what this was, that you're not wrong, Robert. Everything else distracts from that central premise in such a way that it kind of wrecks the movie because it's all distracting. And when you start off with when the whole thing starts off with Lucille Ball is a communist, and we go right into the table read where she's on every joke, she's on everybody else. It's a high intensity situation. You get the impression that she's doing that because she was accused of being a communist and it's affecting her. And then the rest of the movie is about her relationship with Desi, which doesn't really go to the first thing. And when the movie's conclusion is about him copping to cheating, like, then why did we need all this other stuff that was happening? It's fine to talk about if it really was the same week and all, but it feels like Aaron Sorkin had like a list of things he wanted to talk about and put them all in there, and it's a muddled mess.
And then we all to like you've hit on like I think the two major like overarching points.
Mm-hmm.
Lest we forget the subplot where we spend a bunch of time with Desi Arnaz trying to convince CBS and whatnot that it's okay for a pregnant woman to be on TV as being a pregnant woman.
My God, that went on forever.
To be candid, I think I would have found that story, like the story of that fight, like, hey, people reproduce.
Well, here's where I agree with you. Pick a fight, and that's what your movie's about. Not it can't be about communism, her pregnancy, his cheating, and everything else going on, and Vivian's eating disorder or whatever it was, all going on at the same time. Not an eating disorder, but her desire to be thin versus all of that.
Yeah, there's too much that is stuffed into this movie.
Once again, no one said no to Aaron Sorkin.
And there's the constant the conflict between the writers' room that gets way too much time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, aren't you just so? There's a self-congratulatory line in this when they're at the table read, where J.K. Simmons says, if the 8-year-old kid on the show next door is a communist, well, I'm about to go beat up an 8-year-old kid. And one of the writers leans to the other and says, "That's funnier than anything you wrote." Aaron Sorkin, I promised I'd cut down on this, but that's a hack line.
Okay, Alexis isn't here. You can be you. It's fine.
No. Like, she raised a valid point about my repetitive vocabulary. She did. Like that episode in particular. So I've been trying to expand my vocabulary as far as that goes. Okay. That's a hack line.
I'd rather you just be you.
Yeah, sure. I'd rather be a better version of me.
Fair.
Again, that's a hack line. That's, oh, I'm so clever, and these people who created classic television, well, they don't know shit. Like, you idiot. So that bothered me. The story, again, it's unfocused. The constant shifting of perspectives, of timelines.
Which doesn't add anything. It gives you some background on Lucille Ball, but none of it talks about why Javier Bardem is cheating on, or Ricky is cheating on her. None of it talks about why she's putting Desi, sorry. None of it talks about why she's under so much pressure that particular week. None of it talks about why she behaves the way that she does.
The only one of those that I thought worked,
Mhm.
one, was their meeting.
Yeah.
Like, that one works.
That's
That
the only
one's
one you need. If you have to do one more, I think the meeting that she has where they're cutting her contract and
that one's fine, and then her fighting to get Desi as her on-screen husband. Those are okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm fine with those. But there's so much else.
Yeah.
You like her running. You ran 3 blocks with a bottle of champagne. You know, that's basically a hand grenade now. Like, I don't need that. That scene
Right.
doesn't add much.
Yeah. There's a lot of like the early Lucy stuff that I'm like, I don't know. Other than it pads the runtime, I don't know what this adds to anything. I don't know what this tells you about Lucille Ball. Everything I needed to know about Lucille Ball, actually, I get in one scene when she's fighting to have Desi as her husband.
Yeah.
I was like, it's one of the best scenes in the movie, and definitely the best of all the flashbacks. And I think just for context, sure, showing them have meeting is fine. Give me a minute or two of that. Give me her in the boardroom going, I'm going to walk off this project, and clearly, we're bound for greatness here. So you're about to let gold walk out of your room. Give me what I want. And I think it's in terms of just showing what the mindset was at that time, how conservative it was. Again, conservative in terms of let's not make radical changes. I mean, there is a solid point to be made if you're a white man in that generation going, maybe let's not put the Cuban on television married to a white gal. Like, that's sound reasoning for that era. And Lucy absolutely was taking a chance. But I think that goes to the bravery of her character.
If you also don't know the real story behind like like she fought for that, that's legit.
Mm-hmm.
They shot the pilot, and then they weren't really going to air it, so Lucy and Desi basically created a vaudeville skit for those characters and took it on a tour, and then touted the success of their tour as a selling point for like, no, the people are okay with this.
Right.
I mean, imagine that. It is, but like, it's one of those crazy things. Like, imagine maybe that's one of the most successful television shows of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And the fight to get that made in some respects is a little bit mind-boggling.
She has a great line in this that I think also tells you a lot about her character. And that's the thing. Credit to Aaron Sorkin's writing. There are times where he really strikes gold with a single line of dialogue. And when she starts talking about, like, we make X amount of, I can't remember what the math is, but we make X amount of shows per year, and it's like they all have to be good.
I have to kill. I know how I'm successful. I show up here and I kill every time, every day, for 36 weeks a year.
Right.
And then I can go home, and then I don't have to. Then I have to write it. Then I have to get back in here, and then I have to kill again.
Right. And and again, that tells you everything you really need to know about Lucy, so that you can have the rest of the movie. That's the biggest detriment, I think, to this movie overall, is that Aaron Sorkin seems to have felt that the audience needed more than that, and you didn't. You queered the stew by throwing way too much into it, when this was a much simpler, much richer story in its simplicity, and you made it overly complicated and wrecked the whole thing. I'm sad this movie isn't as good as I wanted it to be.
Ditto. Like, I got done with this and I went, I think one of the things I said in the chat was, this guy's going to make me say bad things about Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem, and that's going to hurt my soul because I love those two.
Yeah. Nicole Kidman not given nearly enough credit as she deserves, as good of an actress as she is.
She has been a very, very good actress for a very long time, and I'm with you. I think it's a little bit undersold. I give her credit for a couple of things about this movie in particular. I mean, first of all, the voice.
Yeah.
Like, Lucille Ball and Nicole Kidman sound nothing alike.
Right, and it never comes across like she's doing an imitation.
Never.
Like, I buy that that's her real voice.
That deserves a lot of credit. She's very good about acting beyond just, we talked about on occasion acting with your body.
Mm-hmm.
And which is entirely appropriate given that Lucille Ball was a physical comedian more than anything else.
Which she talks about in the movie. She says,
yeah,
like, I know physical comedy. And I appreciated.
I really did. And which is in some ways so much. Do you know, just idle bit of trivia I happen to know. I don't know if this still holds true. I'd have to double check, but I Love Lucy holds the record for the longest sustained laugh in television history.
Is it the grapes?
No. I couldn't tell you the season, and it's the bit where Lucy is learning to tango with Ricky.
Okay.
Like they actually had to cut it down because that laugh just didn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no dialogue. It's just her trying to tango with Desi Arnaz.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the point being there that if you have those bits of dialogue in there, you need a performance as the person outside of the character that still brings that to life. And Nicole Kidman does a great job of acting with more than just her eyes.
Yeah.
In this movie is kind of the point there.
I'll tell you, Aaron Sorkin's dialogue was like made for Nicole Kidman. She delivered like it's a kind of a weird, quirky film thing to say, but there are a lot of more than I think I even realize. People are just reciting their lines, and they're good enough performance that they can make it work. But it's like you were saying before with Don't Look Up. If you started or what you said before about if you change the cast, does this work as well? Like Aaron Sorkin's writing coming out of Nicole Kidman's mouth is hand in glove. And I feel like that's just a rare thing to see now.
It's a little bit like Tarantino and Christoph Waltz.
Yeah, like that's a really good example.
That perfect marriage of style and delivery and that all coming together.
I could hear Nicole Kidman just say, I clicked the wrong box, or rather, I checked the box like over and never get sick of it. It's short, almost innocuous bit of dialogue, but the way she says it is so distinctive. It really stood out to me.
Yeah, she does a phenomenal acting job, Nicole Kidman, throughout all of this. It's really great. And
credit to Javier Bardem. When
I want to get to him in a second.
It's not even him; it's Tony Hale's line. But he's in the scene where he hands Tony Hale the note, and Tony Hale kind of just throws his hands up in the air and is like, "What did it say?" It says, "Don't fuck with the Cuban."
And he's just kind of dancing his way down the.
So good.
I love Javier Bardem.
Mm-hmm.
He's a phenomenal actor. And the fact that he does it across two languages is kind of a rare thing. Some people get hung up when they have to, because he's Spanish. He's a Spaniard.
Mm-hmm.
T-Max, I think he's a Spaniard. I'm going to go with that off the top of my head.
Just go.
Okay, if you look it up for me, thank you. Fact checking in real time. We don't have a production staff.
Yeah, Pat's not watching tonight.
He's a great actor in Spanish. He's a great actor in English. And
okay, he was born in the Canary Islands in Spain.
Okay. Point being, he's great in two languages. And not just like reciting lines in a different language. Like he acts through his dialogue. He looks nothing like Desi Arnaz in the face. I mean, nothing. But he captures, he does the accent right. And that's a bigger deal than you might think, because a Spanish accent is not the same as a Cuban accent. But he gets the accent right. He gets the speech patterns right. He gets the physicality right. He gets everything so right that you're kind of willing to go along with the fact that if you put their headshots next to each other, like, okay, they're both humans. That's kind of where that ends. I mean, they've both got dark hair, but like, there's not a lot of similarities in terms of facial structure and whatnot. But he gets everything about that so right. It's a shame they underwrote his character in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I mean. There's a line, and it's kind of a throwaway from Lucy, that Desi Arnaz was responsible for creating the camera rigging system that allowed studio audiences to watch sitcoms without their view being obstructed. Like he revolutionized the way we film television. And he's not like, he's given a lot. It's a line from another person said about him. Like they really, I think, undersold him as a character, as a person, and his accomplishments in both the production and the acting standpoint. And I think it's kind of a shame.
Yeah.
Again, that said, that's an issue of writing. Bardem's acting is great. There's a couple of bits, and this is a problem I have with Sorkin's writing in general. He has no grasp on anything other than the contemporary. Which is just to say the following. And look, this is true of any other. Watch the Trial of the Chicago 7 if you feel like you're so inclined to.
I enjoyed it.
Okay. Now tell me if any words of dialogue from that movie are contemporarily accurate to the 1920s.
No.
Not a one.
Nope.
I'm agreeing with you. Like, this is a problem with him. If you want to set something in the past, there's a degree of respect that has to be paid to how the language has changed over that period of time.
Right.
And his utter failure to do so is there's a bit where he threatens to pull the lungs out of one of the executive producer. Like, you ever patronize me again like that, I'm going to stick my hand down your throat and pull your lungs out. Nobody said that. That's an extremely contemporary bit of phrasing. And it just takes me out of there's things like that. There's, just habits of speech and writing and simile and whatnot and other idioms that you need to address if you're going to write something set in a different era of speech, unless you're deliberately throwing everything. Like, there's another example of this, a movie I happen to very much enjoy, that deliberately throws all of this out for a different artistic purpose. But I'm talking about A Knight's Tale, which is deliberately anachronistic. If you're not trying to be deliberately anachronistic about these things, you have to give respect to how people talked back then. And you don't look, you said a movie in the 90s, right? People in the 90s don't talk like we talk now. I knew, I was there. You knew, you were there. I mean, look, I might offend someone with this, so I apologize if you're of a sensitive nature, but 90s and the early 2000s, every other word was fag. It's how we greeted each other. I don't do it anymore because I understand that the contemporary landscape has changed. But if you're going to set a movie in the 90s, you better be accurate to it.
Did you happen to listen to the triple feature from last night?
I have not gotten a chance to yet, no.
This is something that I addressed with Sean. Might have actually insulted him a little bit. But I was desperately afraid that Sean was going to be angry with me for getting him to watch Christine for the very reasons you just said. The language used in Christine was contemporary of its time. And when judged today by what's acceptable, it is unacceptable. It is not a nice way to speak to each other. And I mentioned that I miss that level of parlance and dialogue, just because I'm used to the way things are now. But it was but we didn't have the hangups that with language that we do now back then.
If I may, the argument I would make in that respect is you had them. They were just around different things, which is fine. Language changes.
Okay, fair point. So I just, there were certain things said in Christine that I thought Sean was going to find offensive, and I was going to end up hearing about it for the same reasons you just brought up. That you hear something said of its time. Quentin Tarantino, another example. Quentin Tarantino gets in trouble for, and we actually talked about this with The Hateful Eight. It was a big part of the conversation when I wasn't saying face rape. We were also talking about the use of the N-word. And
we didn't review Django for Damn You
No,
Hollywood.
I'm talking about The Hateful Eight.
I know, but but the same conversation was had around that film.
Right. So in both cases, there was a perceived overuse of the N-word, and Quentin Tarantino's counter argument was, how did you think these people spoke? I am depicting what I believe to be, based on the research I've done, how people would have spoken to each other at that time. And in both cases of Django Unchained and The Hateful Eight, you are transported to those times through the use of that kind of dialogue. Same thing with Christine. I felt like I was back in that time. If you set a movie in the 50s or the 70s and they're not speaking the way that they would back then, they're speaking the way they are now, that's a failure of film.
Yeah.
And to your point about Aaron Sorkin doesn't transport you there. You get there because of the performances, but there's only so much they can do with the dialogue they're given.
Look, this is true of Sorkin throughout his entire career. You want to go back through his entire catalog. He's written some good stuff. I mean, he wrote A Few Good Men.
Fine when you're writing contemporary stuff. So like Sports Night works great. The West Wing works great. He's not, having...
The West Wing doesn't in places for a very specific reason.
Okay.
Hang on.
I haven't seen it. I'm going on what is the general perception of the show.
Look, generally, especially the first couple of seasons, the West Wing's great. I'm not here to bag on it. I am here to say that the West Wing does flashbacks at points in time.
Mm-hmm.
when they're relevant to what's going on. And this is not me accusing him of overusing the flashback at all, but it becomes jarring when you get flashbacks to, many years ago and nobody sounds different.
Mm-hmm.
And look, this is true of all writers. And I bring up Sorkin in particular here because he's the one we're discussing, and how very, very obvious it all is.
Yeah.
Look, we brought up J.K. Simmons. God bless him. Great job.
He's so good.
He
Oh my
nailed.
God.
He nailed the not just the tone of voice.
Mm.
He nailed the physicality of that guy. The posture.
He talks about doing like 20 years or something, or 40 years of vaudeville.
40 years in vaudeville, yeah.
Yeah, and I absolutely believed he did. Like I thought, that line made me think J.K. Simmons had done 40 years of vaudeville.
Which he might have. Like, he's that good. He
Because
does.
he's also a time traveler.
Yeah, vaudeville's still around. The vaudeville tradition is still around. Let me phrase it like that. Yeah, he's great. There's not really a bad acting job in this. There are some that are obviously lesser, but none of them that I think rise to bad.
Greg Clark is playing Greg Clark, but Greg Clark doesn't.
Clark Gregg.
Clark Gregg, sorry.
Look, first of all, buddy, get his first name and a last name, not two first names.
My point is, every role he's given, just about, it's not particularly dramatic. He's the guy when you need someone to deliver like dry, sexless dialogue. He's your man. That's why he worked well as the agent in those Marvel movies.
Yeah, he's fine. Again, he's not asked to do anything. You referenced the actor, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I apologize.
Jonah Hill.
Sure, yeah. He's actually pretty darn good.
Mm-hmm.
And my tolerance for him varies from film to film.
So he was in, I think it's 8-Bit Christmas, maybe. I'm sorry. He's in Clifford. He was in Clifford. I only bring that up because my son, we were talking when we reviewed Clifford. My son's take on Tony Hale was, why is his head shaped like an egg? And he couldn't get past it. I was like, poor Tony Hale.
I mean, look, I really enjoyed him in Arrested Development.
Mm-hmm.
But again, he's just one of those guys that my tolerance for it varies.
Mm.
There's not a bad acting job to be found, but your big three, Kidman, Bardem, and Simmons all knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
It's a shame that the structure of this story was not better. It's a shame that you have a very rich history with I Love Lucy.
Can I just, as far as the cast goes, just shout out to Jake Lacy for being very Jake Lacy in this. And he's the one that plays the bad comedy writer.
Oh, okay.
And like his portrayal of that particular writer, Jake Lacy kind of is one of these guys now that whenever you need a douchebag in your movie or in your television show, he's a good douchebag. He wasn't quite as bad in High Fidelity, where he was just sort of the jockey boyfriend that Zoe Kravitz was leading on. But for the most part, like I said, you need a douchebag. Jake Lacy's a good douche.
There was one moment of writing that I kind of wanted to call out as I thought being pretty darn good.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bit where the female comedy writer is trying to sell Lucille Ball on, I'm trying to make Lucy smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucille Ball takes exception to this, as she should. And her line in response to this is, I'm not looking for a strong female perspective. I'm looking to be funny.
Right.
Understand the brief.
Know the assignment.
And I appreciated that, mostly because that's the moment when so many other writers, again, I'll give Sorkin credit where it's due, so many other writers would have made that a big point.
Mm-hmm.
Like this entire movie would have been about, how do we present Lucille Ball? How do we present Lucy as a strong, independent woman who don't need no man? And how this valiant, up-and-coming comedy writer was shot down by the patriarchy. Like that would have been the movie for other people's hands. And so I wanted to give him credit for that. I thought it was a good bit of writing for him to point out this stupid trend and go, it's not appropriate here. Stop it.
Yeah, I mean, if that's even remotely true in how she felt, it goes to the brilliance of Lucille Ball, who I just never really thought about. But I think if this movie does one thing exceptionally well, besides present wonderful performances, is that it truly frames Lucille Ball as a comedy genius and really somebody who has contributed to the collective American culture in ways most people will never even come close to.
If there's one thing your stupid framing device for this movie was good about doing, it was establishing how big I Love Lucy was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when the EP and the old version of the executive producer sitting there going, 30 million people watched this every week. They had to change which night of the week stores were open because no one would go shopping while this was on. Like, you don't get that anymore.
Yeah.
Which is true.
Well, I've been talking about that for years now. I mean, a lot of what we talk about goes back to the rise of streaming, but even before streaming became a really popular thing, it was sort of a niche way to distribute film and television. I had been talking about like the long tail of culture probably since I read the book on it, and that was over 10 years ago. It was before I met my current wife. So, just the compartmentalization of culture
about 15 years ago when Aaron Sorkin was still a halfway decent writer.
Yeah, the compartmentalization of culture and the long tail of people watching and viewing and partaking in it. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be more siloed. There were three channels, there were three news networks. We had a much richer, much closer, much more enmeshed cultural experience. You are now a stranger to your neighbor in many ways.
There was, in that same vein, I forget who I heard say this, but I heard somebody talk about it. About some of like the loss of shared culture.
Yeah.
What is it that, I mean, the entire notion of the water cooler discussion is something of a relic of a bygone era almost. But, there was a time when you had cultural touchstones that sort of irrespective of everything else going on about you as a person, you could talk about. You could talk about I Love Lucy. I mean, I don't like Seinfeld, but you could talk about Seinfeld.
Yeah, just as an example of that, and this will be the last thing, and then we should probably move on. I watched the latest WWE event, which that would normally be on a Sunday. It was a Saturday this past week because F my calendar.
Day one, Mark. Day one.
All day long. Day one.
You know what? They should keep that tradition and have the pay-per-view on whatever day of the week it falls on.
Wednesday, day one.
I'm not kidding.
So they brought out this musical act, and I know
where you're going with this.
And it's the WWE is trying to hitch its wagon to whatever pop cultural thing is happening at the moment. And 20 to 30 years ago, whatever they would have brought out, everyone in the room would have known. You would have had to have been like purposefully avoiding pop culture to not know what it was. Now pop culture is so compartmentalized. They brought out this group. This happened with Bad Bunny at WrestleMania, where it was like, Grammy Award winning artist, Bad Bunny. And everyone in the room is looking at each other going, who the hell is this person?
Full disclosure about that. Yeah. They said Bad Bunny. I went, I have until this moment. I wasn't even watching Raw. I heard someone else say, till this moment right now, I was not aware of this human being's existence on the planet.
Right.
And it turns out he's kind of a big deal in other subcultures.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like Grammy Award winning. He's clearly sold one or two albums. He's clearly a pop culture icon of some report and repute.
He's not there by accident. Like, they didn't pull names out of a hat.
And no one knew who the hell he was. And people and it wasn't just like my old ass. Like my wife, who is ingrained in popular culture, didn't know who he was. My kids, who are somewhat ingrained in popular culture, didn't know who he was.
No one
People
in the
on
audience,
Twitter didn't know who he was.
Yeah, no one in the audience knew who he was.
Right. And then this happened again, where it's like they send out two fairly popular wrestlers with this rap group or whatever, or soul or whatever the hell they are. I don't know.
Isn't it like Miso or something?
It could have been death metal for all I knew.
No. I mean, don't get me wrong. That I'd approve, but
no, some iteration of pop and soul. came out, and they were called, I guess, Migos or something like that.
Sure.
And again, no one knew who the hell they were.
I think I just called them miso, which is not.
Yeah, that's a soup.
Which is a paste. Well, miso's a paste. It goes into miso. It's an ingredient in miso soup.
And then they stand in the ring and they pose for the, to absorb the adoration of the fans.
Hang on. Like, my favorite line about that actually comes from Matthew of Botchamania.
Mm-hmm.
Even the fake crowd machine couldn't be asked to do anything.
So my point being, like,
the fake noise machine that they plug in on occasion, even that couldn't be bothered.
WWE didn't do anything wrong. It's just we don't have the shared cultural experiences like we used to en masse anymore, to where that would have been effective. Well, they brought out a popular artist of some description, but popular now doesn't mean nearly what it used to 10, 20, 30 years ago.
You want to know the celebrity that's garnered the most reactions they brought out in the last 5 years? You're going to hate me for saying it, and I hate myself for saying it, but it's the truth. It's Logan Paul.
No, I don't hate you for that. I have long since stopped getting emotional. Look, when I heard they were possibly going to do a sequel to History of the World, that was the last time I got emotional about something like this. Everything else is que sera. All right.
Whatever will be, will be. Okay.
Yeah, wrap up.
I'm trying to think if there was anything else about the craft that I wanted to mention. No, again, my hat is off in all seriousness to the actors in this movie, our leading three in particular. You guys,
this is not a Best Picture nominee. This is a Best Actor, Best Actress deal.
Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Best Production, Best Costume Design. Like there's elements here, 100%.
Right. But not Best Screenplay, not Best Picture, not by a long shot, not even close.
Yeah, look, the screenplay, the overall structure, the cinematography, the score, hint, hint. None of those are especially noteworthy.
I got it. Thanks.
So again, not Best Picture, but elements of this, absolutely some of the best stuff of the award season year. 100%.
Yep. All right. And with that, let us return, as we do, to Rotten Tomatoes.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
This segment of the Critical Review is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. For a free 30-day trial of the Amazon Unlimited service, head to getamazonmusic.com/W2M network. Make sure you complete the sign-up process, and you will be able to stream unlimitedly all 70 million songs, as many songs you can listen to for an entire month. If you like it, you keep it. If not, you can cancel. No fuss, no muss. But who doesn't love free music?
You can even find podcasts there, such as ours.
That's right.
We are over there.
And you can enable your household devices, your Echoes and whatever else they're called, to play your favorite podcast like ours. And, we'd like to remind you at this time that if you've just happened upon it and you would like to hear more of our shows, please like and subscribe wherever you found this. We're on every podcatcher, and we're also in video form, as you can see on YouTube.
Yeah, you can see me when I flip off the critics when they do a bad job.
And here we go with that. All right. So
hang on. I have to pitch. Sorry, a group chat just popped up. Someone wanted to know who the villain for season 5 of Cobra Kai will be. I am pitching Zombie Miyagi.
I get mildly irritated when one of you interrupts, something I'm trying to do structurally for idiotic nonsense. I'm gonna let that one slide. I'll allow it. I'm gonna allow Zombie Miyagi.
Zombie Miyagi. We've already that show has long since passed over any sense of reality. So Zombie Mr. Miyagi. I was listening to a podcast about Cobra Kai, and they were like, how it might have been critically acclaimed,
like how one, or rather Red Letter Media, like how one part of California could be this closely tied to like after school karate is beyond any comprehension, but yet it works somehow. All right, so the critics like this one a little bit more than they liked Don't Look Up. It's at 69%, and the audience liked it about the same. Being the Ricardos can't hope to truly capture its subject's brilliant star power, but Nicole Kidman has a ball with Aaron Sorkin's spitfire dialogue.
Yeah, again, I think you're entirely correct. Like, Aaron Sorkin, without knowing it, has been trying to write dialogue for Nicole Kidman his entire life.
Really?
Again, without knowing it. Like, I'm writing, he's just
okay.
writing, and somewhere out there is someone who's really gonna get the rhythm and the poetry that I've got here. And turns out it was Nicole Kidman.
All right, Betty Jo Tucker of Real Talk Movie Reviews. Casting the usually wonderful Kidman as Lucille Ball is like asking Angelina Jolie to play Carol Burnett in a biopic.
Okay, hang on. I don't actually hate that now that you bring it up.
And putting Bardem, Oscar winner for his villainous role in No Country for Old Men, in the part of Music Man Desi Arnaz makes no sense.
You did not watch the movie if you don't understand why they cast him in that role. Like, yeah. Again, if all you're talking about is how they is like, again, headshot to headshot, no, they don't look alike. Watch the movie and watch that film and there's no doubt why look, Javier Bardem's one of those guys, and some friends of mine pointed this out to me. If all you had is Bardem's headshot, you wouldn't necessarily think of him as an attractive man.
Mm-hmm. But
something about him, man, he's got sex appeal.
I'm going to read one, and then I'm going to go AFK for just a second. So, Vamp. Craig D. Lindsay of Crooked Marquee. Ricardos comes off like a histrionic, sensationalistic, mawkish TV movie, which is crazy since a histrionic, sensationalistic TV movie about Lucy and Desi Arnaz already happened 30 years ago.
That is a gross exaggeration of this movie. This is not histrionic. Like, I'm not sure quite where he gets that. Sorkin's writing is subdued most of the time rather than again, genuflecting and over the top like that. That's not accurate. Hawkish, yeah, I'll give you that one. But I also don't agree with the notion that this comes across like a TV movie. This, for whatever flaws it has, this does actually feel like a feature-length film. Again, it's too long, but it has the shine and the polish of an actual movie, not a made-for-TV one. So I don't agree with that. Unless you're the type of person, I suppose, who only grew up in an era when made-for-TV movies got the same budget as Game of Thrones.
Okay, then. Ellen Giselle of Metro Times, Detroit, Michigan. Aaron Sorkin's Being the Ricardos isn't great for reasons that are interesting, and is downright bad for reasons that are perhaps even more interesting.
That is an overwrought sentence. I don't know why you decided to do that. That makes no sense.
That is one where I would need to read the whole review to get the context of that, because
I would, but still,
odd sentence.
There's got to be context to that, but oh man.
Deirdre Malumbi of entertainment.ie. Everything feels rushed in a 2.5-hour movie, lady. Come on. Everything feels rushed and like a box ticking exercise of what revolutionary moments of I Love Lucy to include. The resulting feature feels cool and flat.
You know, the only thing I'm going to say about that I think is fair, and we touched on this, it's overstuffed. And there was no narrative direction.
Don K of Den of Geek, that vaunted website. I Love Lucy, comma, but not here.
Wow. You feel good about yourself there, buddy?
Nobody at Den of Geek feels good about themselves.
I'm shocked it's still in operation.
Yeah. Let's see here. Barry Hertz, I'm sure he does, of Globe and Mail, top critic. Kidman's casting might not be the move that some anticipated, but it is the move that Ball's legacy deserves. The trouble is that the film Kidman signed on for is not quite there. That's true.
That's what that's kind of where we landed. Like,
yeah,
the acting is phenomenal, but the script is a bit of a letdown.
Kathia Woods with, I think, just a very helpful and what an excerpt of her, what I'm sure is a wonderful criticism worthy of a Pulitzer. from Cup of Soul. Underwhelming.
Look, I'm not saying you can't call the movie underwhelming. I'm not even saying you can't call the movie underwhelming in your blurb for something like Rotten Tomatoes. You can. If your blurb on Rotten Tomatoes is one word, I question why they let you still be there, especially when we're not.
Sean Burns of The Artery, capital letters, A-R-A-R-T. Do you get it? Do you get it?
I get what I'm about to open up on that guy, and we'll just see how...
Sorkin's bafflingly bad biopic, Jesus Christ, is a cranky harangue of strawman arguments and fabricated nonsense.
Okay. No. How do you possibly arrive at this being full of strawman arguments?
Yeah, I don't.
What's the argument being presented here? No. You moron. Did you just look up a term? Did you look up a list of debating faux pas and decide that's the one? I mean, you might as well have just said red herrings. You might as well have said hucksterism. It would have made more sense given this was filmed in front of a live studio audience. But here we are. You landed on straw man. Good for you.
Linda Cook with another deeply unhelpful review. Our Quad Cities, WHBF-TV, Illinois. You'll love Lucy. Dreep.
Will I now? You going to be the supreme arbiter of what I enjoy and what I don't, or who I enjoy and who I don't?
See. Lucille Ball was on a show because I love Lucy, which means you'll love Lucy because I love Lucy because you'll love Lucy. Do you get it, man?
The only thing you're about to
Jamie Foxx in No Way Home.
The only thing you're about to get is a shove in front of a bus.
Stop threatening murder on this show.
Doesn't have to be a moving bus.
Okay. Jeff York of The Establishing Shot. It's a tough expose of Tinseltown, sexism, racism.
The hell it is!
And a creative process. Ball may not have always been easy to love, but she earned the respect of those she worked with by hook or by crook.
Look, I
don't think this man watched the movie. I think he wrote that when he was told that he was going to have to cover it.
Somebody find that man and beat him with a fish. Preferably a large one. Like, what the hell? This is not an expose on sexism. I'm not saying there's no sexism that is discussed. I'm saying they actually ham-fisted in the writing a little bit. Like, again, we have our smart, capable comedy writer who goes, and that's how I succeeded as a woman in a comedy writing room. Good for you, I guess. But like, Ball is never condescended to because she's a woman.
Yeah.
No one is in this film. Like,
right.
unless your argument about the sexism thing is, well, we have to pretend that women never get pregnant, in which case I don't know what to say to you if you decide that was a discussion on sexism in a city and an industry that still and very publicly, very recently dealt with allegations of outright abuse, as opposed to a larger discussion about, do we want to show a pregnant woman on television?
Roger Moore, Robert's father, weighing in from Movie Nation. Witty and bittersweet, a biopic that, like Spencer, I need to talk about that, and King Richard, forces us to take another look at public figures we think we know and consider them anew. I don't know if you watched Spencer. Clearly Roger Moore didn't, but Alexis and I talked about this. It is a reimagining of Lady Di the week that she decides to leave her husband. It is very artfully done, though a bit confusing and muddled, and it drove both Alexis and I a little insane watching it. My wife hated the damn thing. It is in no way an actual biopic.
I was going to say, I imagine it's also deeply ahistorical.
Yeah, I think it says, like, right in the Wikipedia page, like, it's a reimagining of the week that led her to leave her husband. The Crown comes closer to reality. Spencer was like an art piece done about that subject matter. Look, I don't know why I don't know why Roger Moore decided to include that here.
I will deal with him in a second. Look, I imagine they decided to do Spencer the way they did as a sad attempt to remind people that Kristen Stewart is actually a decent actress when given moderately decent material, which is true.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think she gets, I don't want to do too long of a tangent. We are almost at 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But like Kristen Stewart is unfairly judged by some of the pictures she's been in, which don't really utilize her acting ability. She absolutely deserves an Oscar nomination. Probably doesn't deserve to win, but she absolutely deserves a nomination for Spencer. And I think she just picked up. So whatever awards were being reported on Twitter today, she won one of them.
Sure, good for her. But as far as Roger Moore goes about the rest of that, those are unfair, inaccurate comparisons. Go home, Dad, you're drunk.
I appreciate you calling him Dad.
I will do that on rare occasion because it makes you laugh.
Let's do one more and then call it an evening. Let's see here. Let's go. Sarah Clements of Pay or Wait. I don't know how all of these people are getting these. They can't have the following you need to actually have to be on here. There's no way Pay or Wait has that kind of following.
I genuinely think a lot of them were grandfathered in.
But I've never seen that one before. That's one of the reasons why I focused on it. Like, I've never even heard of this.
Well, you could tell you what, Google it afterwards, and we'll see what we can find out.
All right, but Sarah Clement of Pay or Wait, another vaunted whatever it is.
It's not vaunted. It's not even a whatever it is.
While its hiccups won't see it listed among Sorkin's best, his deft hand, John Huntsman's detailed set recreations, and Susan Lyle's period costume design successfully transport the audience back to the soundstage of one of TV's best shows. She's not wrong.
No, she is not wrong at all about that. That's one of the things we mentioned. Like the set design and the costuming are very, very good here. Like there's elements of this film that deserve awards nominations and wins in some cases. There's others that are very much not.
All right, I found our favorite guy on here. We'll end with his. Kevin Carr, a fat guy at the movies.
Why must you abuse this man, Mark? Why do you do this to? Why do you keep pointing me at this poor guy?
I'm a sadist, I guess. If you're a big fan of Lucille Ball and her television legacy, you'll walk away with a good view of this movie, but it falls into the traps of the biopic.
You know what? In some respects, yes, but in others, no. Like I did not have the same complaints about this that I did about other biopics, especially when it comes to their formula.
Mm-hmm.
This movie has problems, but being a formulaic, stereotypical biopic is not one of them.
So Rocket Man and Bohemian Rhapsody came out around the same time, and there's a really good dichotomy between how biopics are told and handled. Rocket Man is very artfully done. It uses it uses the screen to tell an interesting and dynamic story while also pointing at some of the things, some more than others, that were not great about Elton John's life. Bohemian Rhapsody just comes across like a VH1's Behind the Music, where it's just a recitation of events.
Hang on.
And I think in both cases, neither of them were tremendously accurate, but I'm not getting into that right now.
Well, look, here's the other problem with Bohemian Rhapsody.
Mm-hmm.
Of all the things I could say about that movie, positive, negative, and in between, here's my biggest negative of that film. Watch that film again and look at how it's edited.
Mm-hmm.
Look at just how many. That thing looks like it's edited by Kevin Dunn. If you're a wrestling fan, you get that reference. There's a lunch scene where there are like 20 cuts in 60 seconds.
Isn't that what I said about Don't Look Up? Like, I'm getting a little tired of the lack of self-control at the editing bay.
Let the shot breathe, people. Come on.
Yeah,
I'm
not prone to epilepsy, but some of these films are going to cause me to have a seizure one day.
Look, another thing I'll give Sorkin for being the Ricardos. The narrative might shotgun from place to place and scene to scene in ways that drive me up the wall. When it's time for a long still shot,
mm-hmm.
he lets the camera rest, and he lets Nicole Kidman just kind of take the scene and lets it hang there.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Yeah, there's a lot of her dialogue where there's a couple of beats before they move the camera or another character speaks. It's just kind of Nicole Kidman in the frame doing whatever she's doing with her body after having said a thing that she said. So it has time to register with the audience. which I cannot say for Don't Look Up or Bohemian Rhapsody.
Same thing. They do kind of the same thing with Javier Bardem on occasion. They
Mm-hmm.
let a scene, they let a cut, they let a shot sit there, and they let the man act.
Can we? I don't know what we need to do to move film past this particular trend, but can we get past the rapid fire editing thing where it's just it's not a music video. You can just like they're trying to give you a sense of the character's anxiety and Don't Look Up with all the cutting that they do. But for me, it was distracting and it took away from the movie as opposed to being the Ricardos where there's, it's not quite 1917, but the editing isn't nearly as noticeable.
When it comes to Bohemian Rhapsody, I want to give the editing credit for one thing. There's a few sequences when they use that rapid fire editing to help depict the creative process for some of the bit where they're creating the song Bohemian Rhapsody. I thought the editing style worked there as a means of helping you get inside the creative brain.
Yeah.
When they're having lunch with their agent, I don't need 18 cuts over the eggs, guys. Nobody does. Stop it.
You're not doing special effects here. It's fine. All right, that is our reviews of Don't Look Up.
Unless Rami Malek's prosthetic teeth were falling out every 5 seconds, there's no excuse.
Goodness gracious. That is our review, yet again, of Don't Look Up and Being the Ricardos. I mentioned it before. Last night, Sean and I did a triple feature, and I thought I was particularly cheeky with these films I chose. It was Titane, El Camino, and Christine. If I Will Send You a Shiny Nickel, if you can guess the theme of that one.
Ooh. Was it Cars?
Vroom, vroom. Jesse hosted a roundtable of everyone I locked out of the Spider-Man No Way Home review that could do a podcast. So it was Jesse, Evan Bevins, David Wright, and Spider-Man superfan Benjamin J. Cologne.
I imagine glorious praise was heaped upon that film.
There was a lot. Sugar, no. Get out of there. Dog wakes a drink from the toilet, I tell you. Speaking of drinking from the toilet. Speaking of drinking from the toilet, Jason Teasley and I reviewed You Season 3.
Oh, that's a transition.
I know. And then Source Material kicked off a year of fun comic reviews with Billionaire Island by Ronnie Adams' favorite writer, Mark Russell. That was myself.
Okay, hang on. I missed the sarcasm on fun when you went through that line. When you went through that first. Man.
So yeah, it was Jesse Starcher, Evan Bevins, and myself talking Billionaire Island from Ahoy Comics. Tomorrow,
ahoy there.
Yes, tomorrow. I dropped the Cybertronic spree off the schedule. I just didn't see a point. But the MCU's Bleeding Edge did a couple of reaction videos to this band called Bandmaid, which is a bunch of Japanese women dressed up as maids, which apparently is a cultural thing in Japan.
It has been for some time.
And so, stealing from my next best neighbor, we're going to do a full review of Unseen World by Bandmaid tomorrow night on the Metal Hammer of Doom.
Mark?
I'm not afraid to steal from my competitors.
I'm not asking you to be afraid to steal from other people. I'm asking you to not piss off the people with racist jokes.
I will not do any impressions. I swear it. I learned my lesson.
Look, it was fine when you were just saying the title of the song. For those of you who don't know, there was an episode of Baby Metal on the Metal Hammer of Doom.
It wasn't that. It wasn't Baby Metal. It was a Metal Hammer of Doom extra of Baby Metal performing live with Judas Priest. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's what it was. And there was a song where the word killer is used.
Mm-hmm.
And one can imagine Mark going.
Here's the thing. I was complimentary. I wasn't ridiculing them.
You were, man. Like, you weren't insulting them. You weren't dismissive. You were complimentary of the track overall. Like, you were fair in your criticism, but some of the people couldn't understand that the YouTube comment section being what it is.
Did not focus on my use of the word adorable and went straight to my mocking them for their lack of ability to pronounce L's. Anyway, moving on. Thursday night, I will be on Movies That Suck and Some That Don't. talking the best of the year. I revealed that list on the Matrix review. You want to go back and hear that. I will be sharing that list with them. And then when done with that, I have my own podcast to do with Evan Bevins and Ronnie Adams. We will be reviewing Prisoners of Ghostland, Shadows in the Cloud, and Out of Death, which I just finished up today. And Prisoners of Ghostland is really bizarre. Friday night, David and Wright and I will be finishing up our review of Lost in Space Season 3, the finale season. I've been enjoying it so far. I really enjoy talking about that with David. Saturday, the fastest rising star in the Radulich and Broadcasting Network pantheon of panelists, Jonas Radulich and I will be doing a comic strip comparing Rumble, currently exclusively on Paramount Plus, to Monster on a Hill, the book in which it was adapted from. Plus, there'll be a re-airing of our Hotel Transylvania 2 review, since a week from Friday, Hotel Transylvania 4, Transformania, will be on Amazon Prime. Sunday, another source material will be dropping. This is Evan Bevins and Jesse Starcher talking Chip Zdarsky's first volume of his 2019 Daredevil run, No Fear, or To No Fear, depending on which site you're looking at it. And then we begin the long march to Scream 5 with our two-part re-airing of our Long Road to Ruin on the Scream movies. That'll be Monday and Tuesday, plus a review of Cobra Kai and the 355. And that's it. So that's all for now. That's what I've got. Again, please remember to like and subscribe wherever it is you find us. And remember to continue to check out our hang on, I was just finishing. Remember to check out our YouTube page and subscribe there as well. And now Robert will tell you what he's doing on 411 this week.
Before I get into my plugs, I just wanted to give everyone out there a big thank you. 2021 sucked in a lot of ways. I don't think that's fairly unambiguously true statement. But we here at the Radulich and Broadcasting Network had a pretty darn good 2021 in point of fact. We closed out with December being our best month ever, pretty much. The year overall was quite good. And we're looking to keep that going in 2022. So I wanted to just express my gratitude to all of you once again. And my hope that you will continue sharing us to any and all of your friends, associates, enemies, or strangers who you think might potentially benefit from what we do here.
If you're looking for some more interaction with us and you're a Discord person, we have a Discord now. The link is in the description for what that's.
Does that still work, or is that the same one you sent me? Because I got a link expired when I clicked on that. I don't know how to work Discord.
Neither do I. I did it as I was told. But if you'd like to be on our Discord and can't seem to get to it with the link I provided, send an email to sgarmer@gmail.com. I
will harass my brother who's a fan of our shows. He does a bit more of the Discord thing than I do. So I wanted to say thank you to that. Again, we have the Radulich and Broadcasting Network Facebook page. You can follow Mark on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. We're somewhat active. Look, I'm a fairly innocuous follow on Twitter. I promise not to fill your feed with politics or porn. And if you're wondering what else exists on Twitter, I don't know either, but I won't give you those two things.
I tend to retweet a lot of movie news, like Morbius being delayed for the 40th time. How bad is it that New Mutants was trending on Twitter today because people were comparing the amount of delays in Morbius to New Mutants, the most delayed movie in history until now?
New Mutants is not the most delayed movie in history, but
that was what was touted on Twitter today.
Aren't you? Look, the hill you're dying on is that Gambit is still the most delayed movie in history, and that it's still coming.
You know, you motherfuckers. I don't talk about Gambit. Okay, you talk about.
I
Gambit.
know.
I talk about Gambit. Look, I don't talk about it.
I talk about it. I poke you on occasion because you do that. That's what. So anyway, that's my big thank you to everyone out there. Please continue with everything that you're doing as far as that goes. We hope to continue annoying and entertaining you in equal measures. We know we do both. We're self-aware here as far as that goes. As far as my other work, I cover professional wrestling a few nights a week over at 411mania.com. AEW's Dark Elevation on Monday. Pretty darn great episode this week, actually. Gave it, I think, a 7. So good on that particular scale. The legend they use 7 out of 10 is good. So good episode. It's only 40 minutes. Dark Elevation is. I got so much crap for saying what Elevation was before other people realized it. When it was back when that show would occasionally dip to like an hour and 40 minutes or 2.5 hours because they were just playing around with it. I said publicly, I don't need 2 hours of AEW's version of Heat or Velocity because that's what that is. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's what that is. The shit I got for saying the truth. The people who went, oh, so that's your only rubric, huh? You can only compare it to something the WWE's done. You know what? I could have compared it to other things, but it is what it is. And look, if for what it is, it's a perfectly acceptable professional wrestling show. Watch it, enjoy it, read my reviews. Thanks. I cover MLW, which is back in action this week. Actually, they finished up their Fusion Alpha miniseries. Starting this week is their Azteca. The MLW Azteca series. They were in Mexico for most of these tapings. So I will be covering that on Thursday, I believe is when they moved to. So the ongoing adventures of Dario Cueto, who changed his name, he's now Cesar Duran, Alexander Hammerstone, King Muertes, and all the good people over at MLW. It's a really good product. It's a shame no one's watching. I can be on it. Look, it doesn't draw good numbers. I'm not going to lie about it. I watch it. I like it. I wish they did better. I'm not going to pretend that they're doing great when they're, not I'm not here stumping for Ring of Honor going, Ring of Honor is great as it goes out of business. I'm not delusional. And I cover WWE SmackDown on Fridays. So I will be covering the fallout from day one, such as it is. After a Raw episode that was apparently pretty terrible, apart from 2 segments, one of which involved Paul Heyman. No shock there. So Friday, live coverage of SmackDown. If you're so inclined, give that a listen. I covered MMA for 411mania.com on the weeks it occurs. There was no UFC event this week. However, I will be writing up in the near future, as in later tonight, possibly tomorrow, my 2021 year-end awards for mixed martial arts. So my thoughts on which fighter had the worst luck, my worst fight of the year, my best fight of the year, fighter of the year, knockout of the year, submission of the year, etc., will all be available up there in that list. The first episode of the other podcast that I host, the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, will be recording this Sunday. I was supposed to do one last Sunday, and well, the last week or so of 2021 kicked my butt. And some of it was physical, some of it was mental, and that Sunday rolled around and I didn't have it. So we're just shifting around some of the scheduling there. It will be this Sunday. It will be previewing the first UFC event of the year, which will be headlined by Giga Chikadze and Calvin Kattar, which is a darn good fight. So we'll get my full preview on that, and I'll probably go over a little bit my year-end awards as well on the podcast. It just won't be as in-depth as my writing up of them will be. So if you're interested in mixed martial arts, please give those a listen or read. I do that, again, pretty much every week because the UFC runs pretty much every week.
All right, folks, thanks for joining us here on Damn You Hollywood. Tune in next week when we review the 355, and I'll mostly be telling Robert what my daughter thought of it. That's how I'm going to handle the whole thing.
I want you to understand part of why I said we should do that.
Oh, really?
Look, Mark, let's talk turkey here. We're honest, right? We're honest with each other. We're honest with the people. Well, you're not. You lie to the people all the time.
I'm a propaganda machine. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, you lie. Well, then you can't admit it. You lie to the people all the time about things I'm doing and what I like.
Sure.
But we tell the truth here. There have been a lot of crappy female-led action attempted movies over the last couple of years. We've reviewed some of them. Some of them we looked at and went, I wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire. You're not getting podcast time. I think it does, however, behoove us to try and find at least one of them that doesn't suck, because just the law of averages says one of these isn't going to suck sometime. You've got a good cast, some of whom have proven they can handle action appropriately. I'm willing to take a flyer on this one and just see what happens. If it sucks, we'll say it sucks.
Wasn't the director Simon Kinberg or something like that?
I don't know.
I have to look. Anyway, so yeah, tune in next week. We're doing
wait, no. If it is, that changes everything.
No, I don't want to do another 20 minutes on this.
No.
So yeah, we got the 355, and then we've got Scream 5. And then either we're doing Escape from Spiderhead and Mother Android, or just Mother Android. We'll see what ends up happening.
And look, if we only do Mother Android, we're probably going to do a 2021 retrospective as well to go along with it. So,
and then
look, that one's up in the air because nobody can schedule anything. Mark, here's what I want you to do. This is all I want you to do. I want you to email every movie studio your copy of the schedule you have laid out for us. I just want you to go to the here's the only thing I want you to say. I'm not saying you need to stick to this to save me. I'm saying if you can't, hire me and I will take care of this for you.
Yeah, the Morbius move hurt me. I was in the middle of watching The Matrix when that happened, and my wife's like, "Why are you so mad?" And I'm just like, "I'm gonna move a whole week of scheduling that I had planned for Morbius." It's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna leave the house." I know how you get when this happens.
Wise woman, your wife.
And the phrase that pays here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network is when my wife says I have to leave the house. So that is the end of our show. Be well, be safe, and behave.